Welcome everybody to our Reentry Symposium. This is our third symposium that we've held, focusing on obstacles and issues surrounding reentry and second chances, not just for King County, but also for the state of Washington. Let me start out by introducing our executive board. We're all up here now. We got Ed, Jeremy, myself, Josh. We all have a driven passion for giving back to people just like ourselves. All of our staff here are volunteers. We do not get paid for what we do. So if you know a grant writer, please let me know. Yeah, all of our staff do have a lived experience. We've all been incarcerated at some point in our lives. We believe everyone deserves the chance to reenter the community with dignity and respect. Today, we have many people in this room that stand behind reentry and second chances for all. We'll be hearing from all aspects of reentry and second chances during the symposium. We are blessed to have Tukwila Mayor Alan Eckberg here with us today, as well as we have State Senator Claire Wilson. We will also have Washington State Representative Roger Goodman, who has not arrived yet, but he'll be here in a later time. We also have Attorney Brad Merrihew, as well as we'll have Andrew Hayes from Adam Smith's organization that will be here later as well. We also have Civil Survival Service, Anthony Blankenship. And they'll all touch on topics surrounding reentry and second chances. If you take a look at your envelopes you received at the registration desk up there, you'll find a sticker, our brochure, a donation card, and a form that we'd like you to fill out at the end. And then turn it into the registration desk when you way out. Let's see, your voice doesn't matter. So we're going to go ahead and start with Ed and Tom. Tom is our program manager who oversees the program and writes all of our directives. And they're going to go ahead and give you a brief overview of the journey project.
So first of all, I'm going to
It's on the set.
John.
It's on.
I want to thank Josh. He did a lot of the organization for this whole thing. The way it's going around today, we're going to have them speak, and if they don't have time, they can take comments and questions. And afterwards, we'll have a opinion, so you can ask anything. We'll be here that can answer. Right. Tom? Yeah. Hi. Right, it's Dave.
You're right. And doing all going on because I thought I had enough. But I know what Josh yelled at me. Anyway, yeah, we're just gonna give you a brief overview of what our program is and what we actually share.
Microphone.
I thought I talked loud. Hello. All right. Well, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what our program's about, what one can achieve by being in our program. We're one of the few structured programs, left. Most places are, here's your room, go about your business. The citizen rate there is high, over a third. Our recidivism rate, and I'll go through that at the end, is zero. In 20 years we've been in business, got zero reoffending. We said we provide structure, stability, housing, vocational skills. Many people come who've never worked another job. And so, well, we don't have the cafe anymore due to COVID, but we do have a landscaping business. And it gets us to where they're learning a skill, you know, and getting resume time. Many don't know how to mow a lawn. Fortunately, Jeremy, he's the one that runs that part of it. And he teaches them actually how to mow a lawn, how to cut the edge, how to build rock creeks, how to build walls, waterfalls, all that kind of stuff we've had in the past. Well, one particular couple moved to Monroe, we went over and helped them set up a business. You know, that's what we look forward to doing, is just helping one gain a career, just not a job. But go through the process. Well, most of us in college did work that we didn't particularly want to do, but we did. I slept in a studio apartment for other people, so it was a little proud. But the idea is for them to build a career, something they're going to stick with, and build a sense of inner being about it. Spiritual. Well, I just touched on it. The inner sense, the inner power within themselves, and however they find that, we're there to assist them in discovering who they are as a person, and gaining that sense of self-esteem that I am somebody. Yes, that's my past, and I might have done a horrendous thing, but for the time you have to let go and go forward, so you become a contributing member of the community. Rules and supervision, well, yes, we have rules, about what, 3 or 4 pages of them on the application. We make it very clear, you initial, that these are things you agree to. And supervision, we work with them individually, so that even as a group, for example, we have one, you don't communicate on somebody's porch by people smoking cigarettes, all that smoke together becomes an interference to other people's lives. So here's where you go to smoke. And when we catch them smoking where they're supposed to, well, they get a $5 fine. Okay, so you know, we enforce. Well, there was structured community leadership. So this is just one little trips we were on before. Dash Alpine. That Alpine was 50. They were on Alpine Beach. And see the leadership there with. We have an open door policy. And once feels like they're needing, because somebody to talk to, work things out with, our door is open. Try to keep our hours to 6 to 4, but we need to be able to assist them. If I'm not there, Tom is, Jeremy or Josh, they all know they have somebody to turn and help them work through whatever it is. In case management, we meet with the individual a minimum of once a week to see where they're at, what they're going, to help them work out the steps to achieving their goals. But often it's more than once a week, depending on the individual. That's what we are, an individual program. We're not a cookie cutter, do this, do that. It's where is that individual in their life? What do they need? And how can we help? What resources can we get for them to, so they can better achieve positive transition? Nobody covered footwork skill training, skill courses. Sometimes learning cooking. We have guys that don't know how to use a microwave, you know, or a phone. So I'll make one get a foot phone. Realize, oh, now we got the transformer, you got to put once about 30 times, get to or better. So, things like that. We have community events where we invite the community. Right now, we have a big tent, get ready for it, and we have electricity being wired out there. Tents. For just inviting. So you're in town for the third Thursday of the month, please come. And then fundraising. Well, we need money. After 20 years, I'd like to get a little bit of paycheck. I want to retire to don't pay. I'll be sick. Here's what a picture of front of the apartment complex. This is an apartment complex here in Tukwila.
I was just gonna ask, where are your housing units located and how many beds available?
Okay, in this is Tukwila property, which is an apartment. And we have at this time about 20 people.
Right now, we got
27 people at this complex.
At the apartment.
So, and we're filled,
Available for families as well, or just?
just men and transgender. We're one of the few programs like the LGBTQ plus population, a place that we feel everybody should be able to feel secure and at home. Be able to build relationships there. Also, the other good, since I'm talking about the apartment complex, you got the trailer court right across from us. We have two, that first 10 years ago, oh no, those people. And so it's completely divided. Well, they've seen over the years, maybe they got something positive going on there. So now they've invited people to their complete program to come down, so that's become a safe environment. They have 2 or 3, they bought trailers, moved in. So they're accepting of more. So, hoping now to just be a community where one feels secure, and go to work, and live a normal life. Come on, all positives. There's a bit of common areas for that picture. There we go. That's the see the row apartments that are down below. 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom apartments. 1 bed are the, I should say, excuse me, a studio and 1 bedroom. And so, depending on if they're in a studio, they're there and they have a single apartment. Common area. Areas where there's shed, fire pit. So we have fires. Very good. There's one of the job site. Well, and I'm proud of it because it was the last landscape job I did. Turned over to Jeremy. But it seemed like clearing it all out. We built this beautiful rock right there. Steps going up it. There's more than that. There you go. See the rock. This is the job was doing block. Stairway. Jeremy did a wonderful job on there. I think. See the rock. Including it. Gives you an idea of some of the things that we do engage in. And this is something that information getting on the individual. These are some of the books that we use to help the individual. and our statistics. 50%, 53% LGBTQ plus, 81% male. Yes. There we go. 19% female. Would we accept our trans, male, female from classification? And we also have now female to male. Like every citizen rate, in all the years we've been doing this, 12 years, we've not had one created family. It's been
Go ahead. Can you hear me? Mention on the program. I'm very honored to be here today. Heroes. Well, I believe in development, so try to instill that out in our participants. Okay. Don't worry. So, I believe in the Noah principle. I try to instill that in the participants. The Noah principle states there are no rewards for predicting rain, only for building arcs. And I also believe that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Okay, you all are part of the solution. You are building arcs. You are supporting people who are re-entering from prison into the community that need a lot of support. Without it, their chances of survival is pretty slim. Okay, so in our program, so work with a lot of you and hope to work with some more of you. In our program, we try to connect our participants to the community resources. We're a small organization. As mentioned, we don't have any money. We're always looking for grant writers and donations to keep us out of the red, but it usually doesn't work. We've been operating on red for some time. So we connect our participants to all of you, to your organizations. So when a person arrives from DOC, I give you a profile of these guys. They come out, they literally have only the clothes on. DOC provides them clothes, but again, the day they were released, they take the clothes. When they come out, one pair of clothes. And of course, one of the first things well, unfortunately, the first thing they ask for is cigarettes. I wish the DOC would have done that while they're in there, getting them to actually quit. But anyway, they come out, first thing they want is a cigarette. The second thing they want is a shower, but they don't have any clean clothes to put on after the shower, which is a problem. So one of the things we do when they first come in, I present them with a hygiene packet, which has more than hygiene, it has a lot of items in it. I call it the second chance starter kit. It has deodorant and body wash and soap and all kinds of stuff. And so they could go take a shower. And thanks to one of our sponsors who provides underwear, we're able to give them socks, new t-shirts, and new underwear. So they're able to go get, take that shower, put on clean underwear anyway. So then we take them up to, I don't know if is Kim here today or anybody from the South county resources. So we take them up there and they're able to get some clothes. The clothing kind of clothes. And that helps them. So slowly but surely we start helping them build their new life. You know, when they come out, their stress level is real high. It's as stressful coming out as it is going in. They don't know what to do, where to go. That's where reentry navigation is very important. And I spend a lot of time with these guys, the first week at least, doing reentry navigation, and making sure that they don't have to worry about it. You know, they come in and they say, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, how do I do this, how do I do that? I just sit back and relax. I'm gonna be your chauffeur, and I'm gonna be your concierge for these next few days. We get them all hooked up. Get them on the truck. And part of the thing we do, we have these guys on a 30-day blackout when they first come in. The reason why is because when they come out, the stress level is really high. Their vulnerabilities, the chance of recidivism at that point was really high. They would just turn loose on the street, they'd probably go back to the house. Old coping skills. Connecting with old friends, they're not very similar. So we put them on the 30-day blackout to keep them with old friends, to go with them, keep them calm. And one thing I've learned, and I tell them this, is that intelligence and emotion lie on separate ends of the same teapot. Your emotions are high, intelligence sinks. Your emotions come down, then your intelligence rises, and you're able to start thinking and make good choices. And our program is all about making good choices. So we sit down with them and we develop goals. First of all, we have certain goals that we set for them. And then one of the goals we set for them is to learn how to do SMART goals. And they learn how to do SMART goals. They're required to have at least 3 SMART goals at all times. When they complete one, they create another one. And they're very goal focused and program, and we encourage that among our participants. And eventually teach them how to fly and let them go. We don't run a long-term program, but we do run a program. One of the myths that people have is that we just provide housing. We're not a housing program. We're a transition program. We provide housing to those that participate in the transition program. They're required to progress. We do weekly reports. The case show that progression. If they can't progress, then we suggest they go someplace else. But most of our clients are well, most times succeed. We have recently had a person interaction program. And he's walking around our little group. He said, look at all these nice cars. I said, yeah. Most of our guys get jobs and they save up money and buy nice cars. Most of them are clientele are employed within 60 days of arriving. And they're saving money. That's one of the goals of the system, saving money. Part of that is so they can buy. And the other part is so that when they're ready, they can afford first investments for themselves. Afford to buy the brooms and mops they might need in that new apartment. We also focus on the titles. Most landlord, we have a title score of 650 or they'll even talk to you. And so we work with the ECU and get that rate, help them get that raised. So that's a couple of goals that we require of the test. Thank you all for being able to help. Currently,
And what is your capacity?
our capacity is 40 units. We are looking for another house. We're hoping. One. It's the battle of our program, and then we will be expanding to Rollins. For 10 and 12. So
Because you're currently serving 40, is that what you said?
we have a capacity of 40,
I don't know,
but not at that full capacity.
that's with the housing, but what about case management services? Do you serve individuals outside the housing program? Or just the housing course?
I personally, I do handle cases outside of the road. Besides, so generally the program. Okay.
How long does the average client stay in your housing program or involved in your transition program?
9 ways.
And then is there any cost when they start becoming employees, or any cost they contribute towards rent or monthly fee?
I'm sorry.
Is there any cost associated, like monthly fee or rent they start paying once they are employed?
Yes, when they first come in, the OC paid their housing for 6 months. Rate of $79, which wasn't quite paid the bills. After that, we charge them $765 a month. And they pay electricity, so. And we do have some partners that actually kick in and help people that haven't found a job yet. What do we need to pay? We have a small organization. We're always looking. But most of them are working. Hey, it's not a problem.
And then if a client has to register as a sex offender, or is that prohibited, or is that okay?
That's fine.
I can hear the question. If they have to register as a sex offender, is that something that they be allowed to say? And he said yes.
Is your housing clean and sober?
Yes.
Okay, and then also, are you a nonprofit 501c3
Yes.
for donations?
We insisted. That they stay clean, so even though the DOC allows some people to smoke marijuana and without supervision, we hold them accountable, we don't allow them to do that even off the premises, we do emails. Make sure that
All right, thank you, Tom. All right, next up is going to be our very own Tukwila Mayor, Alan Eckberg, a big supporter of our organization as well as Second Chance to our community. Right.
Well, hello, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome to the city of Tukwila, home of the Journey Project. And thank you very much for your attendance. You've heard some words about the project, but I want to recognize the folks that are wearing the blue shirts today. We've heard from Ed, Steve, Tom, Jeremy, Coach Josh. Thank you for putting this together here in the city of Tukwila. Well, as introduced, I'm Al Eckberg, Mayor of the City of Tukwila, and a longtime friend of the Journey Project. We're here in the city are very proud of this endeavor of helping brothers and sisters who have been incarcerated through having a leadership team for inclusive entry and transition, for a methodology to support that transition to move folks forward. It's deployed through kindness, through love, through caring, provides a new chance, an opportunity for improvement. Everyone deserves those chances and those opportunities. We need a solid, successful program, which this one provides for those reentering from incarceration. It is so pleasurable to have the Journey Project here in the city of Tukwila. They've been engaging, they've enhanced their programs over time. Reentry program was incorporated in December of 2011, so that's now a decade plus. They continue to evolve and mold their program so everyone feels included and valued. And your help, your recognition, and your presence here today helps with their needs for success as well. Thank you for working to sustain their cause. Let us continue to help those funding, through volunteerism, through achieving transitions for those in need. I thank the Journey Project and for those who support and welcome the transformation of one's life from transitioning into one's future. Thank you, Journey Project, for the hope that you provide to everyone. The understanding and awareness of the information that's being shared here today will help us all understand the depth of gratitude that we have for the Journey Project and the transitional help you provide. So with that, again, thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you for your attendance.
Thank you, Alan. All right, next up, we have a very well-known Reentry second chance advocate, attorney Brad Merringer.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I guess I didn't know as much about the Journey Project, most of you do. Before I got a call from Jeremy or an email, I guess it was from Jeremy and Josh asking me to be here. And it is an impressive story that we just heard. One about how things can be when they're ideal. But as all of you sit there and think about your own caseloads and your own clients and situations, we know that finding these situations is really good. My name is Brad Merrihew. I'm an attorney in private practice in Seattle. I work all over Western Washington representing people accused of sexual misconduct. For the last 15 years, I've been the designate or representative of the Washington Defense Bar on the Washington Sex Offender Policy. There I represent the Washington Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers and the Washington Offender Association. The last 3 years, I have been the elected chair of that board and had the opportunity to make some recommendations that we'll talk a little bit about here today, but to put my mark, if I can, on that board. Present here today is somebody who's going to help me do that, which is Sonia Bardenbrook. Sonia, can you stand up just for a second so I can go ahead through? Sonia has had a career of over 20 years, despite how young she looks, representing people accused of sexual misconduct as well, and has worked largely in the sexually violent predator 7109 area. So she's been doing the hard lifting work. She was recently appointed to the Sex Offender Policy Board as the co-representative of the defense bar. Prosecutors started sending 2 people, somebody started sending us. We're looking forward to Sonia home. Bear that burden. In those 15 years on the Sex Offender Policy Board, I've been involved in a lot of initiatives around the issues related to housing, related to reentry. You know, the big rub for people who are convicted of sex offenders is that our community has certain perceptions about that community, has certain reactions when that community is going to re-enter their communities. And those have led to uproars at various points along the way. In 2014, we did a report around housing when communities were objecting to group homes. And that is when the housing voucher program that DOC runs, it does a great job with, and that you'll hear more about here today. That's when that program kind of got an extra push and went from sort of a small program to a pretty standard procedure. But at any rate, what I want to do today is to talk about sex offenders. And I use the term sex offenders because that's the term that's used in my board name. That's the term that's used in everything that you hear about this population. Let me also suggest that it's a mistake to make somebody make their actions their identity. And that when you use the term sex offender, what you do is you turn somebody into an act that happened at one point in their life. They could have been a million different things, and you lump them all into a population of scary people. And what I want to do today is kind of talk about the history of how we got here with those perceptions, what the myths were that led us to the policies that we have now, what the realities are about that population, and then talk about placing people in housing, placing people in jobs, and finding people a place in our community. Can you advance that to the next slide, please? And I'm going to move out. I'd like to move along anyway. Can't keep sideways. Myths about sex offenders. You know, in 1990, Washington was the first state of the union to have sex offender registration. Did you know we were first? And we did that in response to some horrible venal crimes that I will not describe for you today, but as you can imagine, had our community in an uproar. It was a time in our history when violent crimes was at an all-time high, and that included sexual offenses. The world was very different, 70s, 80s, and 90s in America. And out of that came the Community Protection Act. They created registration, they created the leveling process for community notification. They made the judgment that everybody who commits any kind of sex offense should be on that registry, even if they did so when they were 12 years old. And it created at the same time the civil commitment process that we now know as the Sexually Violent Predator Program out at Midland Line. Since that time, things have changed a lot. At the time, the preamble to the legislation said we know certain things about sex offenders. They're extremely high risk to reoffend, that they have to be watched, that they're sneaky, that law enforcement needs to know where they are in order to investigate new crimes, that putting these people on the registry will give the public some satisfaction and a sense of peace because now we'll know where the bad guys are. The problem is that none of that is really true. If you look at the population of people who commit what we'll call sex offenses now, and then I'll break it down a little more, the recidivism rates for people who are convicted of a sex offense are among the lowest of all felons. If somebody goes through the treatment program that some of you know called SOSA, the Special Sexual Offender Sentencing Alternative, then that person has the lowest reoffense rate of any felon except murder. That is to say, a reoffense rate in the 1, 2, 3% range. Even for the general population of sex offenders, what we find is that reoffense rates, even for high-risk populations, are sometimes 13, 15% over the course of 5 or 10 years. And the studies all vary, and we can all use studies one way or the other, but the conclusion that they're at high risk to reoffend turned out not to be true. Likewise, the idea that if we have a list where we can know where to look for somebody, then that will help us to solve those crimes has turned out not to be true. And studies have demonstrated that it's had really no practical effect for law enforcement at all in solving those crimes. And if there were a legitimate law enforcement purpose, that might make sense. But when we look at this issue recently, the best the Washington Association Sheriff's Police Chiefs come up, but there was one study that was poorly done that showed a marginal increase in clearance rates on investigations. Wasn't certainly the kind of evidence for it. So these myths about sex offenders, that they are that they can't be treated. And what we've learned since then is that treatment does work. Now, at the time that these laws were adopted, the treatment modalities that were used were very negative and very restrictive and didn't give people a lot of hope. Since then, that industry has evolved, and the new treatment modalities and programs are based on helping somebody achieve their goals. Everything that you just heard from the Journey Project is integrated into sex offender treatment. So it's about setting goals, it's about reaching those goals. One of the models is called the Good Lives model, where you set goals for yourself. And that treatment has been shown not only to reduce reoffense rates, but to increase success in reentry and community satisfaction and all of those things that we'd like to see in people's lives. And then there's this idea that sex offenders, if they're approximate to particular people, pose a risk to children or to vulnerable adults for other reasons. And that's why many states have residency restrictions. And even Washington has Department of Corrections rules which limit people's ability to live near a particular school or daycare, et cetera. While we looked at the issue of residency restrictions at the Sex Offender Policy Board, and what we found is that there's no research to support them at all, that they're counterproductive, but they again reduce people's successful reentry into the community. So here in Washington, we don't have those as a policy statewide. There are 3 communities that were allowed to grandfather those in, which is Puyallup, Monroe, and Issaquah. Have some sort of restrictions, but other than that, there are no restrictions imposed for people who are not on DOC supervision. But if you are off of DOC supervision, then those restrictions don't exist at all. Next slide, please. The next slide. So as I say, the reoffense rates are low. I cited already, was a 2006 study. We have the Washington State Institute of Public Policy that does research, and they've done a ton of research on these issues. And what we see is that reoffense rates generally are much higher for non-sex offenses. And so, that's one of the differences between people with sex offense convictions coming out of prison or were released from jail or wherever they come from in the community is they're not as likely to have prior sexual offenses. They're not as likely to have as many what we call criminogenic factors. They're not as likely, as I say, to reoffend in any respect at all. And so when you see the reaction people have to, well, just don't run into sex offenders. What I would argue is that in taking that view, you're taking down a higher risk population, not a lower risk population. Next slide, please, Tom. So let's talk about the sort of the idea of a homogeneous population of people who crawl through the window and rape randoms. And those people exist. As I always say, psycho killer is out there, and we need to be afraid of those people. But they are rare. In Washington, we use a system of classification based on risk levels. And level 1, the lowest risk, is 70% of the people who are on the registry. That's based on the use of empirically based risk assessment tools, a lot of research. And what we see overall is that population of people who are level 1 are at extremely low risk of reoffending. Those are the population that still has to register, but they're not out there or searching. So if somebody comes to you for one of your programs, one of the questions you might figure out is, are they a level 1, a level 2, or a level 3? If you go and search them online on the state online registry, only if they are a level 2 or a level 3 will they appear there, or if they're homeless, or if they've been found to be out of compliance and they're looking, then a level 1 will appear there as well. But for the vast majority of people who are level 1s, if they rent a house, nobody tells the neighbors, no flyers go out. And in fact, the program is sending out flyers, that community notification really only happens for level 3s anymore. Most communities, and it's different counties have different practices. So for the most part, only the level 3s are the ones who are having to do that now. Next slide, please. Actually, go back. That's please. The thing that's probably most troubling about the sex offender registry is the false sense of security that it gives the public. The public thinks if I know who this guy is down the street and I watch him and I warn him and I tell my kids to be afraid of him and be careful of him, then they'll be safe. But what we know is that 95% of sex offenses against children are committed by somebody known to the child. That the person who is a risk to a child is not the convicted sex offender who's on DOC supervision and taking regular polygraphs and understands the consequences are likely life in prison for them. It's that weird kid down the street, the uncle who wants to babysit a little too much. It's grandpa as he starts to get dementia. and loses its boundaries. It's a million other things. And unfortunately, as a defense attorney who works in this field, I have seen over and over and over again. And what I rarely see are offenses against children by strangers. In fact, those are sort of the unicorns of my business, because they just don't happen the way they do on Law and Order SVU. In the real world, the threat to children are people you already know. So what victims advocates, to their credit, have realized is that community notification process, the fear of the community, and those times when they have to deal with these issues are also great times to educate the public on prevention. And in my view, we don't see enough focus on prevention and that kind of education. So what I'm suggesting is that if we do a little paradigm shift here and begin to think about people with a sex offense a little more individually and stop looking at them in this homogeneous way, we'll find that often they're not very high risk. Violence is extremely rare. The crimes of rape in the first degree, rape in the second degree, and indecent liberties with forcible compulsion are the only 3 crimes in Washington that require a lifetime registration. But those are crimes that still happen. We still see convictions, but we see a few dozen convictions for those each year. We don't see hundreds and hundreds of statewide. A lot of the people who are convicted of sex offenses anymore are chatting online with a detective in their 40s who said that she was 15. A lot of them are branded as sex offenders and go to prison because they were looking at child sexual abuse images. I do not make light of child sexual abuse images, child sexual exploitation, or the dangers to children online. And so do not hear me minimizing, rationalizing, or offering any excuses for that behavior. But what I'm telling you is that somebody who's caught and prosecuted for committing that kind of behavior is a very low risk. It's somebody who likely was struggling with depression and mental health problems at the time that they engaged in this behavior. It's people who respond very well to treatment. And it's people who do not typically have a history of criminal behavior and very unlikely to go back to behavior. So if you look at an offense, see that this is a sting operation, this is a child pornography case, or this is a chatting online with a person who is a real child, turns out, whatever it is, I don't make light of that, but that is a very different offense than the kind of sexual violence that we see in those more serious cases. And then I'll just say that a large percentage of the people who commit sex offenses and who are on the sex offender registry did so as children. I am thrilled to announce or to mention that we've fixed that problem largely here in Washington as of a recent signature by Governor Inslee on House Bill 1394. And what that bill does is it eliminates sex offender registration for those who are 15 and under. It eliminates sex offender registration for kids of any age who are engaged in the treatment program, the special sexual offender dispositional alternative. And it means that instead of being on registration for the rest of their life, because it was an indefinite duty where they had to come back to court and bring an attorney, pay a lot of money, those duties will now all expire depending upon the minor at either 2 or 3 years without them having to do that heavy lift, which is huge access to justice. So with that, law enforcement over the course of the next several months, we're removing those people from the past. A couple thousand people are going to come off the list, convicted as juveniles. I know we've already started by some of the clients. It's going to make a huge difference in those individuals' lives. So the problem with minor offenses on sex offender registry looks like it's going to be solved in the next several months. Next slide, please. Treatment, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, the Good Lives model. A lot of work has gone into the industry. I'll call it an industry of providing sex offender treatment around the country. The Association for the Treatment of Sexual Abusers, the national organization, has set a high standard. They have very clear ethical guidelines, curriculum guidelines, and big conferences, and it's a huge area where there's a lot of work being done. But what they're finding is that with better and better techniques, the treatment works even better. So engagement in treatment significantly reduces risk. Treatment also is a great place to start. One of the things I'm going to recommend, which is networking for people convicted of sex offenses. And in treatment is where, when you're in group, you get the advice of all the other men in the group about what you can do, where you can live, what jobs might be available, etc. But the bottom line is that treatment works. It reduces an already low recidivism rate. It gives people support. It helps them with reentry, and it helps them with that network. Next slide, please. As I say, you know, the recidivism goes down with treatment. It's a source of support, and is a good. When you look at people who are convicted of sex offenses who are in the community and on DOC supervision, particularly as you're trying to place them in programs or you know, sort of advance this person to housing placement or whatever, one of the things that you should know is that DOC supervision works. They monitor people who are convicted of sex offenses very closely. They report more regularly to their CCO. They're more likely to be given UAs, particularly if that's an issue for them. They take polygraph examinations every 3 to 6 months to ensure compliance with conditions. Their house gets tossed, their things get searched, their devices get searched a lot more often than other types of offenders. And so that population, if they're on DOC supervision, is at very low risk of the kind of bad behavior. I think people who run housing programs or people who provide employment are always worried about. There also often are restrictions on who sex offenders can see, and for them, that's a big barrier to employment. It's one of the things you always have to think about is incidental contact with minors. Many of my clients, you know, have some of them approved, but they show up and somebody decides at the last minute to bring an infant, they have to leave, and all of them have to leave. And so there's always these sorts of considerations for them that I mentioned, just because if we're thinking about housing placement, they're not, or excuse me, employment placement, and they're not going to be in jobs with it. That concept.
Brad, use the mic, please.
Okay, sorry. And then, you know, their internet use is being monitored, all the other things that are happening to make supervision effective as it is. Next slide, please. I'll say that sometimes they come with intense restrictions on the internet, but because the internet is so essential to use, DOC has safety plans, programs to install the software. When people are coming right out of prison, though, sex offense, and they have internet restrictions, that's when they tend to get into trouble. I completely agree with what was said earlier about how risky those first few weeks are. And during that time, they're frustrated, they want their phone, it hasn't been approved yet. So just understand that what we all consider baseline to participate in our society access is not necessarily going to be instantly available on release. And as I said, the probation officers can monitor all this, and this is all becoming pretty routine for most. You know, as I say here, next slide, please. People with sex offenses are good tenants. They're good tenants because they're grateful to have a place to live. They're good tenants because they tend not to be involved in criminal activity or using drugs, using alcohol. They typically don't abuse their homes. They pay their rent on time. And I say these things because that's what housing providers who rent to sex offenders have told me, not because I wish good things about my clients. But what I've heard from housing providers over and over is that once they realize this population of people are as stable as they are as consistent as they are. And on top of that, if you're running a group home, then those group homes have regular visits from the Department of Corrections. And so in terms of any nefarious activity, you're a lot less worried about that happening. You know, it's kind of funny, one of the things that was really objectionable to some of the communities that came to the Sex Offender Policy Board back in 2014 was group homes. And the idea that the cluster of sex offenders in one location is bad thing. And, you know, sort of intuitively, they thought, well, they'd get together and plot something or whatever the concern was. And so we went out and looked at the research, and what we found is there's a couple studies, a one out of Colorado, that found that where people with sex offense convictions are housed in group homes, they're less likely to commit probation violations, they're more likely to be confined to treatment, they're less likely to recidivate or have other problems, just all the way around. They do much better because of support, because they hold each other accountable, and because of the sort of transparency that comes from living in that sort of environment. So it turns out that the DOC model now for housing vouchers to contract housing providers who provide those group homes is that model. And I think it's one of the reasons they're having the success that they're having now. Next slide, please. Again, you know, they're a great employee population too. You know, one thing that I've noticed over the years is that almost all of my clients, when they get out of prison, are underemployed. You know what that means? Underemployed means you're working some $15 an hour job, which is menial, or you have an engineering degree, or when you used to be a teacher, or you used to be a doctor. And I see that over and over again. These individuals who have a great deal of talent. And so sometimes, you know, that's hard for people to accept. Some other times people channel that into the rest of their life, and maybe people like Alex Mayo, people who refuse to kind of be down and take all of that energy and channel it into changing the world, changing the people around them, or doing whatever it is that they're called on to do. And so, Alex, I'll just stop and say, currently heads up the group called Washington Voices. And Washington Voices is an increasingly credible and vocal advocate for people who are on the registry or affected by the registry. He and Joanne Smith, who's sitting next to him, along with many other men and women, have had that organization. They have been at the table and been making their points in a hugely respectful way. And most importantly, embracing those ideas, how to live a better life, how to live a positive life, how to be contributor to your society instead of a complainer of what your society did to you. I never hear that from this organization. Very impressed with it. So what do you do to find housing? I'll just throw out the things that I tell my clients. You know, the number one thing I hear from people on next slide is network. You know, and people who participate in 12-step programs find that that's a great place to find housing leads. Your sex offender treatment provider, groups like Washington Voices, or wherever, your church, etc. That kind of social engagement obviously is good for those individuals as well, but that's a great place to find it, because if somebody doesn't know you and you have that label SO on your front forehead in bright red letters, then it's hard to get in the door. Strategy that I recommend, because I grew up with a family of landlords, my parents rented with hand lettered signs to whoever came along that they liked. Never ran background checks, and had some tenants that they kept for 20 or 30 years. But what I've seen in the recommendation I made is if you go into a neighborhood where you think you want to live, then drive around and look for hand lettered, for instance. Those are the people who are renting the unit in their basement, the unit in the back. And then what I tell my clients to do is to go in there, look these people in the eye and tell them their story. You know, it's one thing to turn in an application and then walk away, and then they're going to see those words on that piece of paper and you are done, and you just wasted your time and theirs. And so if you're willing to risk it and look somebody in the eye and tell them your story, 19 out of 20 of them may send you down the road, but you only need one place to live. You only need one job. And so I compare it to being a young starlet auditioning in Hollywood. You've got to go in for a lot of dignity, get your lines down right, make yourself look as good as you can, and accept the rejection, and just keep going. If you do that, then people find jobs. I want to say something about federally subsidized housing. There are rules that say that you can't be in federally subsidized housing if you're required to register for life. But they don't say that otherwise you can't be there. But most of the providers read that to say sex offenders aren't allowed. And so you'll see these per se restrictions. And I've done trainings on this before. But the only crimes in Washington which require lifetime registration are rape in the first degree with forcible compulsion, rape in the second degree with forcible compulsion, and indecent liberties with forcible compulsion, or if you have been deemed by a jury to be a sexually violent predator. So those are the only ones, and that population is about 3% of the people who have sex offenses. So the truth is that federal housing programs can be accessed. And where this becomes really important is as we have an aging population of people who are required to register, people who are on supervision because we have lifetime supervision. And those folks need access to skilled nursing facilities. They have strokes too, which means they're going to need to go somewhere for rehabilitation. They're going to need to go into adult family homes. Are we just going to put them on the street because they're required to register? And so, we have to start to think about that population, that aging population, as we think about what housing resources available, and those shag homes or those kinds of places. If there's a way to help those individuals get into those kinds of situations, it's obviously the best. As you know, there's a network of clean and sober homes throughout the region. Many of them are faith-based. Many of them won't take somebody with a sex offense, but if you call around, some of them will. There are the sex offender group homes that are offered through DOC. What you should know is DOC contracts with these providers, but those providers, if they have vacancies, can also rent them independently directly to other individuals. So the trick is getting the names of those providers. The rules don't allow DOC to give them to you or to me. But if you can use your resources, or we can all figure out a way to identify those individuals and sort of get them in the loop, then those sex offender group homes, those transition homes that people enter as they come out, the same kind of program that they were just talking here, where DOC pays the housing first. Again, other people can go into those programs. Sometimes clients are successful doing things like renting a room online, but I'm always clear that they have to disclose beforehand because their CCO is going to pay down fees. And then last resorts, extended stay hotels. Sometimes your community corrections are okay with that for a period of time in transition. And a lot of times, at least in King County, they'll tell you Union Gospel Mission. So if somebody loses their housing or a house isn't approved, or there's that kind of transition, what happens for people with sex offense convictions who are on DOC supervision is there can be a lot of chaos around a new CCO. New CCO comes in, the rules all change, everything's upended, the person calls me in crisis. This has happened to me only about 1,000 times in my career. So I'm speaking anecdotally from a really large state. And even DOC, I've talked to the head of community corrections about this many times too. They know it, but it's still the way it happens. And when that happens, people find themselves in the house pretty regularly. Next slide. In terms of finding employment, I say HR is evil. All stuff is true. But what I'm really saying is that the human resource, any organization large enough to have a human resources department will screen out an application for employment by somebody who has a sex condition. And so, that's a bridge you can't get across. You have to do that. So there's those personal network, get around to a hiring manager, put it up front, whatever. But what I tell my clients is, if you're sitting there at home in your jammies, applying online to all these corporations that everyone in this room knows, then you might as well be watching a movie. because you're not gonna get English. And so, you know, in terms of targeting your efforts, it's the smaller and medium-sized employers that are far more likely, you know, if HR is the sister of the founder, you know, then you've got a chance to go in, as I say, look them in the eye, tell your story. Networking, again, that's often the number one way to get a job. As I say, mid-sized to small companies is where to target those efforts. I advise clients to apply first, even if that's not what they want, even if they say, send me the application online, I'd show up. You know, look at the best you can, look them in the eye and say, talk to them. And then do what I'm talking about. I can't tell you how many of my clients, because they've been so direct, so transparent, and so upfront, it's refreshing. Employer says, you know, I'm gonna give this person a chance. So it's like anything else, they have to be prepared for that. And that's something that treatment can help with. It's a great place to get that support, because typically then what you need is a speech. Canned, how you talk about your events, and don't start rambling or getting too far pushes on that. The last thing is starting your own business, and particularly for people who aren't on DOC supervision, what I have seen and observed is many clients come out of prison and a few years later they're richer than all. Because they've had to start their own businesses, they've had to find a way. You know, I always talk about Ryan. Ryan had an old beat up truck and wouldn't get ladder. He put an ad on Craigslist and said, I'll come clean your gutters. And people called him. When he showed up, nobody ran a background check. You know, he was a nice guy, well dressed, looking in the eye, clean your gutters, it's price, give him some money. And, you know, within 3 years, he had a couple of employees in F-250, and those ladders were now fiberglass. In other words, he managed to put together a business even at that low end. I have one client who is the world's largest distributor of animal parts for ceremony purposes. If you go to a powwow, drums all come from this company. And he started that in 1998 when he was released from DOC. And that was his hobby, and nobody would hire him. And now he's got, I think it's a 3,000 square foot building and 10 employees. And buy this stuff all over the world. You know, it's just about finding that entrepreneurial spirit, which means finding belief in yourself and a reason to get out of bed. And so that issue of depression and getting stuck is what always stops my clients, and it's the thing that you guys can do. And I hope you do. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Brad. Appreciate it. All right, next up, it's a person I call a friend, an advocate for reentry and second chances for all incarcerated people returning and incarcerated community. Washington State Senator Claire Wilson.
I guess it is good afternoon, good afternoon. Do you want to stand up, stack, and then take a curl around or something? Embrace me, because I know you've been sitting down for a while, but I won't let you leave talking to us. Yeah. So, already I am just really happy to be here. And before I go any further, I just like, you know, there's other people in the room that I'd like to know right here. One of them, Senator Noel Green, here. Sponsor of 1398, which was the family responses to sexual offenses, and want to make sure that she gets her due, because I spent a lot of time in both the House and thanks for Goodwin and the Senate, making sure that that bill got passed. The other person I want to introduce is Senator Bob Hasselbeck, who's sitting right back there. And so this is the area which she represents. So I'm really happy to have two colleagues in the room to join me today, and then you'll be hearing from her after. So I want to thank Journey Project. I'm not going to name y'all. I'm just going to say thank y'all. for putting this together and inviting me to be here today, because I think in this room is way more experience than I have. But my job is to hopefully be a voice in a space for others to create the change I know that we all want to see. My name is Claire Wilson. I am the proud senator of the 30th Legislative District, which is South Lee County. I represent Federal Way, Algonah Pacific, a little bit of Des Moines, a little bit of Kent. Grew up in Seattle, but have lived in that area since 1999. Care deeply about this community and about the geography of the South County area and the diversity in the South County area, but also care deeply about kids and families and individuals across our state. Currently, I'm deputy whip in the Senate. I vice chair early learning and 12 education committee. I sit as a member of the rules and transportation committee, but I think I'm here today because I chair a human services committee. And within the context of that, I cover all of DSH's programs, all child welfare, all juvenile justice, and all the Department of Corrections outside of the judicial side. So all those kinds of wraparound services and supports that you would think about that happen both inside our institutions and inside the walls, but also outside as we think about reentering our communities successfully, just like you all want, and just as a community that we all do. I first learned about the Journey Project when I was at an LGBTQAI+ event myself, because I identify and I have for a long time. And they were working the event and started having a conversation with them at the table, because I believe you were ballet as well as setting up and tearing down, and was able to find out a little bit more about the work they did, about the housing, vocational training, one-on-one case management. And it was there that we kind of started a relationship, and they reached out to me during the interim and also during the Senate to start a relationship to think about how we could start working together. They've been grounded in community, they are grounded in lived experience, and they also are grounded in intersectionality, which is incredibly important to me as we think about vulnerable populations, who we're serving, how we're serving them, why we're serving them. So I'm incredibly thankful to be a partner in the work and to do what I can do, not to be a voice for others, but to create the space for change. I think, again, that we all want to see. Access, opportunity, representation, and voice are all critical pieces of the work which we do. I'm here today, and hopefully that's why you're here today as well. So I wanted to share some roadmaps for my comments so you don't get too like, holy crap, what's she going to talk about? So I want to tell you a little bit about my personal investment, why I think I'm doing what I'm doing. What my approach is, I've been chair of human services only for 2 sessions. And again, there are a lot of people in this room who have way more experience than I do. I want to share a little bit about accomplishments that we were able to have this last session. And then want to talk a little bit about where I think we go from here and kind of what's up for the future. So first and foremost, I want you to know that I know I want the privilege. And I use that privilege every single day. Like I said, not to be a voice for other people, but to create space at the table that was never there very beginning. I identify and I can choose to walk into a room and disclose every day or not. And there are so many of you that do not have that opportunity in this room. You walk in a room, and by the mere nature of the look at your voice, it's like you are already put and pigeonholed someplace or somewhere. Not because of who you really are, but because other people think about you a little bit that from granted. My own interest also comes from a personal. I have a nephew who was in the foster care system, who spent time at Green Hills, and who was also at Stafford Creek. And during that time, I had no idea, no connection, no clue what support looked like or how to help him or even how to have access. And he is 20 years my junior, and that still follows him every day. And I'm old, and he's younger, but he's older. So I'm 67 and he's 47, and every day it still follows him. It is what he tries to do for himself and for his families. From him and from many other people that I work with over the years, I have heard how it can feel like it's experienced
that one has had at one moment in one's life that's virtually impossible to overcome. And that should just never be. And I think much of that is due because our systems, our institutions were never created to get people out of them. They were created to keep people right where they were. And they were created just to give people a nugget about what it would take to get to the other side, but never affording people with the resource, the support, or the access, or the opportunity to do just that. So I consider myself a disruptor. I'm an old lady, and I personally don't care what someone thinks if I think it's the right thing to do. And if I put people at the center of my work, I hope that we're making the right decisions for the right reasons, not just for those people, but really for all people. Early in my career, I worked in Tacoma. I taught 11 to 21-year-old pregnant parent teens. And those parents are now in their 50s and 60s, and their kids are in their 30s and their 40s. And I still have contact with many of them today, and have been able to wonder aloud, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? And what do we need to do differently? Many of them are still system involved or were system involved, whether it was through child welfare, whether it was through juvenile justice, whether it was through systems of incarceration. But some of them were able to rise above and be able to create successful lives for themselves. All of them are critically important in my journey when we work. It's also when I moved to early learning, because as we heard, prevention is the way that we stop all of these things from happening. I also want you to know that when I did move to early learning, I started part of the start of the residential parenting program at WCCW. So again, it's for kids and families, and that's the parenting program where women who are in hurting or with 18 months of release and don't have any vaccine offenses and are pregnant and due to deliver no longer have to have their children go to family or friends or foster care. They are able to have their children with them, and a residential parenting program where they're supported and taught about what it means to be parents, because it's not something that comes with directions. And if you didn't get it, you can't get it unless you know something different or unless you learn something different. I also will tell you that I have a developmental approach to the world. And so I was really happy again to hear all that Brad had to say, because in my work with kids and in my work with adolescents, what I know is when trauma happens in someone's life, development stops. Whether it's substance use, whether it's child abuse and neglect, whether doesn't have a basis, whatever, development stops. And unless and until that is dealt with and someone is provided with the resource they need to heal themselves whole, it becomes who they are. So it isn't about a chronological age, it's about a developmental stage that people are at. And so in my work, I always look at where folks are developmentally, and I want to know more about their story, because their story tells a lot about their age. Their age doesn't. I also learned, I taught for a long time in education, that for every 1 unit of change, you need 3 units of support. You don't just say that, you actually do that. And that's how I've been trying to approach the committee work that I've been doing in the Senate. It isn't about just saying you need to be changing. It's about what it looks like, what those units of support look like. Because again, if we were all given the same access to services, supports, and our resources, we would not be in the situation we're in. But we weren't, because our systems, again, have never been just, and they've never been equitable. So I started to work with families and children to prevent the outcomes that are grounded in privilege and need to be disrupted in order to provide the just support needed to get outcomes for all that we all desire. I also believe the glass is half full, and there's good in everyone and everything. And I believe that's what this reentry work is all about. It's about disrupting systems. It's about providing resources and supports to give individuals the opportunity to overcome past, to build a better future, which we all want for ourselves. So in my view, the work I do is framed in 3 truths. So the first truth is that our systems, like I said, were built to keep the people where they are, not them to help them get ahead. We see this in our criminal justice system with mandatory minimums and with old sentencing rules that have meant that people aren't treated as individuals who made mistakes, but as mistakes themselves. We also see this in our facilities and our systems serving those who are incarcerated, built to warehouse people rather than to provide them with the resources to recover, to grow, and to re-enter our communities. The second truth is if you didn't get it, can you get it? And you do what you know unless and until you're given an opportunity to learn another way. When push comes to shove, even if you want to do something differently, you do what you know, or you do what was done to you or twice. Good, bad, or indifferent. And in my work with young patrons, especially when we would talk about that, nobody ever wants to do something harmful or to do that. But when you're put in a situation, it's almost as if a fight or flight, you do what you know unless you learn another way. And I also know that people live in the context of families and family systems, which are incredibly complicated for every one of us. And some families way more complicated than others. So many systems involve adults or children who actually didn't get their needs met. When we think about homeless situation, we think about substance use disorder, and opioid use disorder. When we think about what we're dealing with, mental health or health issues, they're hurting people. So my mantra this past session, and people will tell you here from the Senate, in committee, in caucus, and on the floor, was that humans cost money. They cost lots of money. And all humans, regardless of who they are, where they come from, or what their experiences have been, are deserving and in need of our support. Humans cost lots and lots of money, and it certainly is cheaper to prevent problems than from paying for them on the other side. And until we learn that, humans will continue to cost lots and lots of money. And we can't expect people to invest time and work and care in communities if we haven't invested in those things ourselves. The third truth I live by is that work thrives when there's shared power. So power within versus power over. I believe that leveraging our power creates more successful outcomes that can be achieved. And I don't have a lot of fiscal capital, don't have a lot of money, but I have a lot of social. And I have a lot of friends, and I have a lot of connections. And I'm now in a place where I no longer have to beg people to make the difference I've been trying to make for a lot of years. But I tell people, don't try to convince me, I already know, just tell me what we need to do to make a difference. So our work's cut out for us, and we have to change these institutions that have been constructed, like I said, just right where they are. We also have to build systems that believe that end reentry starts the day somebody walks in to the facility or the institution, not 30 days before they release, not even a year before they're released. But the fact is they need to walk in knowing they're walking in, and they're going to walk out with what they need to be more successful than they were when they walked in, not in a worse place, but in a better place. And I truly know that is not happening. Not because there's no want, but because there's not been a will or way or the resources from individuals who've been able to make those kinds of decisions and actually invest dollars that need to be invested. Incarcerated individuals and those in reentry have been waiting a long time for the institution to change. And institutional change takes forever. So what I've been trying to do as well in making those institutional changes, think about what are those things we can do that would provide actual change for people in that system So they actually had hope and a belief and trust that what we said we were actually doing and that we were actually trying to make the change. So that what happens is that the institution isn't the only focus, but the actual people are also the focus. So with that in mind, and with the help of a lot of folks in this room, we were able to pass a bunch of legislation this session. And what I will also tell you is legislation doesn't come from the inside, it comes from folks like you, who can say, this is working, this isn't working, I got a great idea, or this needs to be changed, and here's my idea. That's where ideas come from. So first one I want to talk about is 5134, which is better known as the Reentry Services Bill, or gate money. I don't know if you know about that, but gate money was set in 1972 at $3. Two $20 bills coming out of an ATM, right? And I was like, are you kidding me? What can $40 buy with more problems? Or recidivate right back into a system that you're coming from. And so we were able to pass a bill that increases gate money, budgeted now at $300 for and it also will allow and require DOC to provide a 90-day supply of prescription medications for anyone who's also releasing individual. The session, we did a little work on Healthcare Authority, HCA, and getting Medicaid set up and Medicare set up for individuals pre-release. And then this is the second piece. To be very honest with you, that the governor vetoed what little pieces available. Okay, because the most important thing for me was gate money. But the part that was vetoed really was really related to FTE, so full-time equivalencies and DOC staff. And so I'm going to spend a little time over the interim looking at the investments that we've been able to make in the reentry space to figure out where we actually have gaps in service and where we actually need those FTEs to go to make sure we're putting them in the right place. And so the major parts of that bill were passed, and we'll take some time, like I said, over the interim, and then we'll put something forward again this next session. So this will be like the third round of the reentry bill that we've done, but that's okay because things are incremental, but there's also change happening. So the next one is 5131, another one that's really important that I was able to sponsor and pass the session, and that is around commissary. And I don't know if you heard about that one either, but right now about 90% of the dollars that families put into commissary accounts in our institutions are taken to are deducted. So if you put $900 in, you get $100. And so 5131 that becomes law on July 1 says that family and friends of incarcerated individuals will no longer face an undue financial burden. So their loved ones can buy essential basic needs through their commissary accounts. So 100% of the money that goes in for commissary will go toward an individual's commissary account. Just like right now it gets waived through postage and also some medical services. So that's another bill that we passed. Again, how is it that we're actually allowing change so people can feel we mean what we say and we say what we mean? So that's the commissary bill. We passed other bills. 1345 was by Representative Haravar, and that makes it so incarcerated individuals no longer are required to contribute to the cost of extended family visitation. You know, what people started to understand and what we were starting to share is that it was costing more money to try to go after people than you ever collected. And so unfortunately, when you put a fiscal note to it like that, people are like, well, they're maybe more willing and more likely to make a change. Another bill we were able to pass that was a wonderful one that was sponsored by Rev. Simmons, near and dear to our heart, is House Bill 1169. It's the eliminates the mandatory legal financial obligations, and it eliminates the 2 mandatory fees and replaces them with a dedicated stable source of funding. So again, individuals can move forward, but we also know the victims. It was the Victims Fund and also I think the DNA, those are the 2 funds that are funded by that, will now have stable state funding, and we're not going to rely on individuals and families, really, frankly, of those individuals to pay for that. Another one I just wanted to share because I do see women in the room and a lot of individuals that are women identified or work with women is we were able to pass Senate Bill 114, which is healing centers for supporting adults with lived experience of sex trafficking. And for so many years, we've been victimizing victims, and we continue to do that and really thinking about the root of where things come and the why, as we talk about sexual abuse, we talk about sex offending, whatever. We have to think about the why. And so this is a bill that was brought forth by individuals who have been in either commercial sex trades or sex trafficking and were victims as children as well, and creating healing centers across the state that are supportive and are driven to help folks again re-enter and find where their passion and their purpose meet and create a new life for themselves, which I think is really, really exciting. So we know systems of support are really crucial for reentry. And the goal I always have is to try to figure out how those systems set up so that they're also facilitated, but they're also a bridge. And what I know is that doesn't happen on the outside. It happens when communities and individuals come into our institutions and facilities and create relationships, and then become that bridge for facilitated reentry, coming back out into communities. So you know there's someone looking for you, you know there's someone waiting for you, and you know there's someone that can provide the support and potentially the encouragement that you might need. So we have a lot of work to do. As I said, I think reentry starts on the first day of incarceration or in any kind of facility that you might be in. I wanted just to talk a little bit about our state's efforts and our partnership with the Amend program and the goal of the program to really seek a change in our correctional system. And it's inspired by the approach in Norway. And we are working with the Amend program to try to ingrain the beliefs, through changes in the institution, through training, through professional development, and support, and to really adopt the concept that exists there that people go to court to be punished and they go to prison to learn to become better neighbors. And I was able to go to Oslo, it's almost a year ago, with Rev. Goodman and a group of individuals from the state, but also from Oregon and from California and North Dakota, heaven forbid, and there were folks there also in the Czech Republic. And we were able to visit 6 prisons, learn about their approach. And I have to say, what struck me the most in all of our conversations was, and in everything, everything they do is talk, touch, and relate. Everything they do is talk, touch, and relate. Doesn't matter who you make a connection with in those institutions and facilities. And what I noticed is we have no talk, no touch, and no relate. When you come in as an institution, when you're trained, you come in as a human, you come in as somebody who thinks you're going to make a difference, but institutional, our systems have been set up. You don't speak, you certainly don't relate, and you certainly talk or touch. You house and you move from place to place. And that's the system that's being changed. And it's going to take time for that institutional change to happen. But I truly believe there's a will, there's a want, there's a way. And we also have to resource them. And I think it's an important piece of work. And I think there is progress being made. We have more work to do inside the institution. We have more investments we have to make sure that happens. We have to figure out how it is we take an institution that's created cement and gray and all those things, and then we can't get rid of them all. But how is it that we change the climate and the culture and even what happens inside to do what we can do to make changes in our system? As I said, we need to empower community organizations like folks I see here today to partner inside institutions and creating relationships so folks can come inside with those relationships set up. John Kretzman, who's a favorite guy of mine from the Midwest, defines community as anything with 4 walls and a wall. You can have a community, a school, of a neighborhood, of a group. Classroom. And I think what you've done and what you're doing by creating a space for community-based organizations is creating community. And that's really what success reentry is all about. We need to continue to explore a cross-system, cross-sector work. And I say that especially because of the pandemic. I was looking at some statistics, and I think volunteers within DOC are around, they numbered around 7,000 pre-pandemic, and now they're at about 2,500. So clearly things are coming. If there's anything that's new normal, I don't even like those words, but as we think about recovery, we also have to think about how we're now bringing folks back in and what that looks like and what support that needs in order for that to happen. Because I truly, truly believe that's the difference that people need. You need hope and you need connections. We don't want folks just to serve time and then to come right back out and recidivate. We want people that are there to have the access to the resources they need to make the changes they want to make, so they can come out and not just survive, but can thrive. Can thrive. And we, again, created systems that just keep people just surviving. So as I've said before, if you didn't get it, can you get it? Our job as a state and a community is to provide the resources and the space to enable successful reentry, regardless of circumstance, regardless of zip, regardless of identity, and regardless of life experience. Every person deserves a second chance and a fresh start, and that's what this is all about. So I just want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank you all for all the work that you do. And I really, from the bottom of my heart, want to say that the work you do is some of the most important work that we need to continue to work on in the state. And folks with lived experience are voices that need to be listened to and voices that need to be lifted. And that's what I know I will continue to do, and I know my colleagues will continue to do as well as we move forward in the coming session. So I just want to thank you all so much for being here, and I'm going to pass the mic, I think, back over to Joshua. Thanks.
All right, next up, we've got our representative, Roger Goodman, Washington State House of Representatives.
Thank you very much, Josh. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here. I'm actually here more to learn, listen, and to talk at. So I'm going to be fairly brief. What I really thank Senator Wilson for the comment. She stole pretty much everything I was going to say. Everything that accomplished. Although I really do have to say that we have made a lot of progress in Washington State Legislature getting progressive issues. Tax, we have capital gains tax now. We have been very aggressive in environmental protection, protecting organized labor, reproductive rights, and so forth. Justice system reform is arguably the most difficult. If you look at everything we've accomplished, justice system reform is kind of coming up at the end there. I had, for instance, one bill this year to unstack sentencing enhancements for firearms. No retroactive application. We weren't going to be releasing anybody further early, and even that bill couldn't make it through the Senate. So we got a lot of work to reform our justice system. I am chair of what's now called the Community Safety, Justice, and Reentry Committee. Actually, you took reentry out of the name of your committee, you put it into the elected. But reentry is that important now as a sort of subtopic within the criminal legal reform. And no one really, that word wasn't even sort of current 15 years ago. Nobody knew what reentry was. We have since created the State Reentry Council, which has a stratospheric trajectory, really helping us, our legislative work. And you here, either with lived experience or with loved ones having touched the system, understand how important reentry is. And so we put reentry in the name of committee. that I chair. And Tara Simmons, who you all know is the vice chair, she and I sit together to try to make some change. The our system, this country, it's the Anglo-American system, is punitive and vengeful. It has been for 600 years. So it's really hard to transform a system fundamentally radically. When I was in the Pacific Islands, I saw what restorative justice means, where someone who might misbehave is not stigmatized, or labeled, or kicked out of the community, but is restored. They have to perform, they have to show the knowledge that part of it caused, but they're welcomed back. That was an inspiration for me to see that. We put restorative justice into the juvenile statutes. It's more easy because juveniles are considered rehabilitatable, and yet there's a struggle to put restorative justice practices into the adult system. For the last 3 years, I have co-chaired a sentencing reform task force, which is seeking to reform the system that way. About 85% of the criminal offenses that are committed are non-violent. No one is physically harmed. It usually involves poverty, behavioral health, and theft or damage to property. And still, we lock people who commit those offenses in cages, which is traumatic, counterproductive, and expensive. And so the new system, I don't know how or when we'll be able to get this done. I'm trying to figure out when to introduce the bill, but it is a complete transformation of the sentencing structure. So that at the bottom end, where it's significant, or bottom part of the sentencing grid, less serious offenses, judges will have the discretion not to order any confinement time at all, but to sentence the person back into the community, where we would wrap around them and have them be the center of their own future, rather than objectify. We need to empower people to take charge of their own lives. This we already do, but somewhat with juvenile. But we should do it with all other adults who are not a threat to others. There are, as you know, a very small percentage of people who are a threat to the community, and they need to be incapacitated. That's just for the purpose of saving. Very small number of people. The remainder are languishing, traumatized. Their liberty has been taken away. I was walking on the beach years ago, Tomato Island. I said, wow, I'm the chair of this committee, and it has jurisdiction over the justice system. I'm comfortable with taking somebody's liberty away if they violate our social norms, if they harm others. And I instantly responded, yes, I'm comfortable. But over the course of the last few years, I've really become less comfortable with the idea of taking somebody's liberty away if all they do is respond to their behavioral health situation or poverty, and they're not physically harming others. There has to be accountability, not necessarily by taking somebody's liberty away. So that's the sort of driving force for coming up with a new sentencing system where judges would acknowledge that the person is not a threat to the community, but would hold them accountable, but restorative and compassionate and productive way. So we'll see how we get that done. But I might very well introduce this bill for the next legislative session to provide a lot more discretion for judges. And again, built into this is what Senator Wilson was talking about. Reentry starts the day you step into the facility. And I'm wondering, the part that the governor vetoed, is that the 1 year requirement that, oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the part of the bill that was very exciting to me.
Yeah.
1 year prior to release, everyone has to have a reentry plan. I thought, well, that's exactly what you do.
And that's what I'll,
Okay,
that's
so
what
that
we're
was
pushing,
vetoed.
that's what I'll back out then.
We gotta work on it.
Yeah.
This is no, if those who are incarcerated just languishing for years without any programming or supports, you shouldn't be there for years in the first place. In Europe, as you may know, reentry starts the day you enter, not just 1 year before release. So we really have a lot of projects. So I met yesterday, happened to be yesterday with Alex and Joanne, sex offenses and lifetime supervision, registration burden. And I do intend, hoping to get either Senator Wilson or Senator Craig to get opinion thoughts on the Senate to legislate in the next session. Finding some relief, so rationalities, lifetime registration, lifetime supervision, so that those who have been predicted these events but are now living successfully in prison, or actually experiencing some significant burdens to achieving success, that we need to remove those burdens from them. It's going to be a tough, whenever you talk about sex offenses, Brad he's a real treasure. We're very lucky to have him. So, but there's that stigma, there's that media whipping up fear. If there's ever a difficult issue within justice system, it's about sex offenses. And so this is a broad sweep. All sex offenders are predators and alligators waiting for a teenage girl. And as Brad said, it's 95% of stepdad or someone who knows. So that's where you all are really important, not just in the context of sex offenses, but of justice system reform, because you need to tell your stories. I, as legislators and frames, we're already enlightened, we get it. But many of our colleagues, most of our colleagues, are responding to that fear whipped up by the media. This idea, this notion that, well, as long as they're registered, you know where they are, they're going to be safe. That false sense of security needs to be explained to our colleagues in the legislature with regard to sex offenses, but with regard to all of the other burdens that the justice system has put on you, that those stories need to be shared. So when the time comes, next session and the session after that, and thanks to the Journey Project bringing you all together, we're going to need you. We're going to need you to tell your stories and to inspire and educate our colleagues, to make this critical justice system clear. Just my concluding comment is that the issues and the matters we're talking about here are sort of headline news, and it's what's unusual, right? It's deviant behavior. It's sort of on the extreme. Again, people doing harm to others and we're locking people up in prison. It's great for television, great for the headlines on TV. But if you think about it, there is nothing more central to our society than the consideration of what is just. And so the justice system is really a reflection of who we are as a society. And I don't like what we see, and what I see. I want to see a justice system that is more compassionate, more therapeutic, more restorative, less vengeful, less retributive, and less costly. And so although the subject matter seems to be marginal, it's not about taking your kids to school, going shopping, and getting stuck in traffic. It actually is central to who we are as a society, and we need to change that. So that's what inspires me to continue to do my work. But I'm inspired by you being here as well. We're going to need you. So thank you very much.
All right, next up is District Representative Andrew Hayes for U.S. Congressman Adam Smith.
Hello all, how are you doing? It's been great. Thank you so much to the Journey Project for putting this on, doing it in Tequila. We are happy to have us in the 9th district. If you're not familiar with your U.S. congressional districts, you are among the 99.9% of people, but we are in the 9th district. Congressman Adam Smith is the U.S. congressman for the district, which stretches from Bellevue to South Seattle and then down through most of South County. And as a proud constituent and a resident of Tequila, I'm glad something in Tequila. It's great. Much of what's already been said, I'll be quite brief with my comments because much of what's already been said really highlights the substantive work that's going on in Washington State with great leaders like Senator Wilson and Representative Goodman. At the federal level, though, I want to highlight just a couple things that are happening that the congressman has been speaking about. I'm going to highlight, I get wonky with 2 pieces of legislation, and then I'll talk about one really cool project I'm doing here locally that we're excited about. I think the framing has been set out by the previous speakers that the way that we treat people coming out of incarceration is a reflection of our values and is what will contribute to the health of our broader community. We think about just the shortage of workers right now in so many industries. What is being done to ensure that people coming out of incarceration can use their lived experiences and their skills to fill the holes that we see in all of these industries? That contributes to the overall health of our community. It's something that we can be talking about. Just last month, we announced Congressman Smith's projects that he's going to be supporting what's called community project funding. If you don't think that the federal government does anything for the community, this is one thing that we can point to and say they definitely do. Each year, we're able to nominate several community projects and to ask for funding from federal agencies for those projects. So last month, the congressman announced 15 different projects that he's requested funding for, spanning from infrastructure to health. And one of the projects that I'm really excited about is with Weld Seattle. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, or if there's anything in the room from Weld. Okay. We at the office, Congressman Smith was able to ask for $4 million for Weld Seattle's new, I think it's called 1426 Vaccine Reintegration Resource Center. It's going to be down in the International District. They've already been doing work there, and this funding will allow them to retrofit a building that they have. And that building is going to be serving as a one-stop shop for people who are coming out of incarceration. So as they re-enter the community, Weld does lots of great stuff, connecting these individuals with resources, promoting housing stability, and expanding job opportunities. So again, when we talk about the needs of our community being met with the needs of those who are system impacted, Weld is right at the nexus of those things. So we're extremely excited the Congressman's been able to ask for funding for that, and just let's get through the debt ceiling mess so we can get that funding distributed to the community. A couple pieces of legislation, because we recognize that what's going on at the state level, while transformative, is only transformative here in Washington State, and insofar as we can set an example by kind of the soft power that we have across the country. But the congressman is interested in using the federal government to ensure that the benefits that are in Washington State are not just kept here. The good ideas that we have here spread to the rest of the country. A couple pieces of legislation that he has supported in meaningful ways that have been able to do that. The first one was actually reauthorized most recently in 2017. It's called the Second Chance Act, and it invests federal dollars, which we know are the big dollars, in local and state programs for reentry. Okay, so a lot of what the federal government can do is they're not as responsive to what's going on the ground. That's where we need CBOs, that's where we need local government, but they can fund the programs. So the Second Chance Act in 2017, through his role on the House Armed Services Committee, the congressman was able to get funding for that and to get that legislation passed. So we're extremely excited about that. And that's funding that's been passed out through a variety of community-based organizations and local government partners across the country. And then one other piece of legislation, again, talking about employment, the importance of that. The Fair Chance Act of 2019. This was, if you've heard of ban the box legislation, and it's legislation to ensure that someone's past incarceration does not affect their employability. So this specifically prohibited any federal agency or primary federal contractor from asking an applicant's criminal history on initial employment applications. So that's a significant. I think about when I was coming in high school, college. That's been my experience all along. Now I don't have to mark that box, but I'm always looking at that box and thinking about my friend who's coming out in a little while and how that's going to affect him. Well, if you're applying for a job with the federal government or with federal primary contractor, you don't have to worry about that. So that's some neat legislation that passed at the federal level. There are other things, Medicaid coverage for people coming out of incarceration, which Congressman Smith has been a strong supporter of. Programming through the First Step Act that actually invests in counseling and services for people while they are still incarcerated. But again, I think that the things that we want to highlight are so often local, and the inspiration that we can take from local organizations, local legislators that are generating ideas that truly can be replicated around the country. Washington, we have a proud heritage of coming up with good ideas that get copied by the rest of the country. So if we can continue to make headway on this important topic, Just know that you have a congressman and Congressman Smith who is going to use those ideas and bring them to the rest of the country. Thank you very much for letting me be here. Thank you for your progress.
All right, next up is a proactive organization that helps those incarcerated and those who have come from incarceration, as well as they lobby for changes in the legislature. I'd like to introduce Anthony Blankenship and Kelly. Are you coming, or is it this Anthony? All right, Anthony. Oh, no.
That's my boss over there. So yeah, I work for Civil Survival Project, which is an organization that supports people in reentry with legal aid services, as well as trying to help change and make positive criminal legal reform. So they pay me to say all that. It's my story a little bit. Well, I'll tell a little bit more about our organization first. So it was started by Representative Tara Simmons, is the first formerly incarcerated person who's been elected to office in the US. And so she's been a great advocate for change. She is an amazing lawyer. And she's seen that there was a huge need in both the reentry legal aid area, as well as on the policy side to make important change. So she decided that she was going to run for office, and she is kicking ass. And our organization, I think, over 50% of our employees are people who've been directly impacted by the criminal legal system. It's an important statement to make because we're talking about jobs. I'll get into that and the box in a little bit. But what I do want to say, some of the things that we can support with, and I'll be over here at some point, I think, handing out information about some of the stuff that we support with is LFO reconsideration and helping people get some relief from that, just because of the high interest rates, how hard it can be on somebody to actually try to jumpstart their life when they have so much compounding debt. We're helping out with some of the blank relief and making sure that's on people's records, and then we also do occupational, I don't know if call it, Kelly, occupational licensing. So if you have if you have a felony or a criminal background and you're trying to get occupational licensing and they're trying to deny you, we can help out with that. And then also relief from sex offender registration and vacating that process. And so we mainly focus on those 4 areas. You can take a look at our website and get some information about that. What I did want to talk about a little bit is my story. I didn't come up here, I had no idea what I was supposed to come say. So it's like I'm just gonna rip off everybody else. So Brad, you talked about 1 in 20, and what they say is that 1 in 20 of people that are behind bars or at some point getting out into our community. I'm one of them. I'm someone who's been impacted by the criminal legal system. That journey for me to try to get back on my feet took time, took a long time. It took a lot of support. It takes community, just as we say, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes community for all of us to thrive and succeed. And I slept on my floor 3 years, on my dad's floor for 3 years after release, trying to get a job, trying to get housing, which is impossible. Trying to get back on my feet. And, it took me, I will let y'all do the math because I slept on the floor of my own home for a year, but I bought a house after 2 years of being out Because I was not able to get, I was never gonna be able to get, to be able to, that was my view of it. It's like, this is impossible. You said 1 in 20, you know, if it just takes one person out of that, you know, out of 20 tries. And so let's just think about that for a moment, because if 95% of people aren't gonna give you a chance to for housing, if 95% of people ain't gonna give you a chance for a job, what does that look like, right? I can go down the line, relationships. 95% of people are gonna give you a chance for relationships even. But that's probably everybody, you know, so. But that also means you have to tell your story. You have to be, 19 people are telling you no over and over and over again for different things. And then let's just say you get that job. Then you have to go through the whole process of somebody telling you no or housing, 19 times. That's 40 people you told your story to, and let's just say, they said, their people are getting jobs within 60 days, upon release. That's their average. So that's in 60 days, somebody's told you no 20 times. You have to get up every single day. You have to get up off the floor every single day off a little tiny mat. That was not much better than the mat that I had in the prisons, to try to get everything that I needed to be successful. That's not easy. That is not easy. That is something that a lot of us here have struggled with. And I applaud every single person who has that resiliency to get up. And I applaud every person who doesn't have resiliency to get up because he tried, and when it comes down to, we talk about chances and second chance employment, all that kind of stuff. I have a cousin right now who is in treatment for alcohol. He doesn't have a criminal record, or he might have one from youth or something like that, but it's not a barrier for him. But it took him 3 years of us telling him to get treatment, to, do that. I had to pay his rent multiple times. It's not about, for that community, what I'm trying to get at is you can't give up on anyone.
Yeah.
You can't give up on people. You can't just say, this is, I gave you 1 chance or I gave you 2 chances, right? Because at the end of the day, it takes a long time to learn some lessons. And that goes for all of us. I didn't recidivate, but I did go back to jail. And it was after one of those no's, and they wanted to take me back, or they want to put me in jail a couple times. And I didn't do that. They still wanted to put me in jail because they were like, because of violations, and there was no violation there. There was just a threat that a violation could have happened, or something along those lines. And so, you have to had 11 different CCOs, 11 different people, or 11 different correction officers from the community telling me every single time, multiple times a month. I was there. I had it for 3 months. So let's just say that's an average of, close to, or once every 3 months of somebody coming in and threatening me with making sure that they're establishing their dominance over me and telling me that this is the way it's going to be. You have to listen to me. Right? I say that to say, one thing that is commonly heard in our, in the criminal legal reform space is, and this goes for a lot of spaces, is hurt people, and kill people. And we have to start also applying that to the systems that we're working on, that we work for, how we work against, I work against. I work with, right? Because as Representative Goodman said, right, like, and actually Senator Claire Wilson had a bill in the part that was vetoed, would have a director of social work. Department of Corrections has been around for how long? They don't have a director of social work? What does that say? I bet you they got a director of safety, right? So what are our priorities as a community and how can you make a difference? And that's really where what we do at Civil Survival is trying to work with, the legislators, working with other providers and working with people who've been impacted to make a difference in our community. The first step, it is voting. If you all ain't registered to vote, I encourage you to do so. One of the things that we were able to pass, a couple of years ago was to allow people who are getting out to be able to the right to vote as soon as they get out. And so for those sex offenders that were, on lifetime supervision, but paying their taxes for decades, they were never able to vote, right? For 100 something years, they were never. I mean, let's just get it straight. Like when you're not in the community and you're behind bars, that still applies right now. Yet they're counted on census. So we need, we still have work to do when it comes to voting. I see you all legislators, and this is my advocacy right here. And since I got you all, no, but it starts with that because they listen to their constituents, they listen to their donors, they listen to people who've been impacted by whatever it is. But at the same time, like the most impacted person to a legislator, and I'm just going by my knowledge, they can all say something different, is their constituents because they're the people who put them in office, right? They're the people who they represent. And so I encourage you all to vote because let's just say y'all don't care about them and you don't care about voting. That gives them the right to not care about you, right? And to care about your voice, about your opinion. And I'm just not talking about these people individually. I'm talking about in general at every level. You have to care about them because they're the ones who are creating these laws and putting us in the situation that we're in today. And for good at that, I think there's a lot of good systems out there. Obviously, a lot can be improved. And they're supporting people in the community, just as Adam Smith, said there are said that that's what big money is. That's true. That's important. And I do want to touch on one more thing because I didn't get to that bandbox. So, congratulations, but that stuff is messed up. Let's just say, it sounds good on paper. It sounds good. Let's just down that box right off the bat. But I can tell you from firsthand experience, that bandbox got me a job. That bandbox got me a job. Before I told I had some other interviews. And I was like, oh, if I got a job, they're paying me good. Like, I'm good. I don't need to go to this interview. Don't do that. Go to every single interview. If y'all are impacted, you got to keep on going, regardless if you think you have that job, because they can do background checks on you after you get the job. So you were good enough to get this job. You were good enough to beat out 200 people for this good job. And then afterwards, they're like, let's just take that and pay. sorry, you did something in your past, you don't actually deserve it. And so when we're talking about chances, and we're talking about these chances that we need. And we talk about community healing, this is where it's, this is the thing that everybody can do, right? It's not just about banning that box, it's not just about taking that off, because that is an invisible barrier. They can now Google you, they're going to search for you, they're going to look you up. And so we got to do more. One of the things that, in housing too, there's thoughts about banning the box for housing. What does that look like? And where does discrimination actually happen? People who are impacted are actively discriminated against every single day of their lives. If I have to tell you my story, somebody says, as you said, right, it's that scarlet letter, it's that it's marked on your forehead. You have to, you're encouraging people to tell you their story. That 40 times that you have to tell your story for the housing and employment and then whatever else. I think my time is probably short, but I'll wrap it up by saying that I appreciate the work that the Journey Project is doing, because where we're at today is, as a community, and these are people who are not getting paid. They're doing this out of the kindness of their heart. We need more people like them. We need to be able to support organizations like the Journey Project, like Washington Voices, like Civil Survival, that do the good work, because at the end of the day, these are organizations that are led by impacted people. We definitely know, because we definitely know what our people need, because we're part of them and we listen to them, right? And so I encourage you, to take at least some of what we said here and try to apply it. And if there's anything that I can say, it's like this empathy. If you can apply it any kind of way, it is to give people empathy. You might not be able to employ them, you might not be able to give them a chance, and for housing, you might not be able to give them a chance at dating. But what you can do is show some empathy for people. And that is the first step. And when we do that, I think we can start to heal ourselves and start to heal others, and get and then we can hopefully together build some of these systems. So with that, I'll end it.
All right, next I'd like to welcome House of Mercy, Mike Lover, say a few words about our organization.
Thank you, brother. You're welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, come on, you have to do better than that. Good afternoon. I'm really both and honored to be standing before you today, such a distinguished panel. I mean, I have more connections and corrections than I do with mayors and senators and attorneys, but I'm really humbled to be here. If it's all right with everybody, I always heard it said that a message from the head will reach the head, but a message from the heart will reach the heart. So if it's all right with everybody, I'd like to speak from the heart for a minute. My name is Michael, and I'm a pastor and published author and program director of House of Mercy. We are a faith-based clean and sober housing program. Our pastor put a really good 6-figure job 15 years ago to go full-time into corrections. I know that sounds crazy to some sitting here. And then you see people getting out, and sadly, nobody with housing. For a Christian nation, we believe in second chances, but just not in our neighborhood. And so he started housing people in his own house. And it's now grown into 27 houses that's currently helping 250 people. And so I'm really blessed to be a part of that. The really tremendously amazing and miraculous part of that is 3.5 years ago, I was on an ankle bracelet. And 4 years ago, I was on my 38th year of a life sentence. I don't know what part of my testimony is more shocking, that I'm a pastor, a published author, or a program director, or a former almost 40-year prisoner. To me, the published author, just I'm a 9th grade dropout, but I'm really blessed to be able to do the good work I do, because everybody that's coming out of prison, and 95% of people that are incarcerated are getting out. And every single one of them is somebody's son, somebody's daughter, somebody's brother, somebody's uncle or aunt, somebody's father or mother, you know, and if you don't hear anything else I say, a person's past doesn't determine how far they can go. I'm living proof of that. It just dictates where you start from. And none of us in here are defined by our worst moment, I would hope, right? You know, we've all made mistakes in life. Some of, by the grace of God, never ended up in a prison or a correctional institution, you know, drinking and thinking I could make it home, and you did, you know, but each one of us, if we're really honest with ourselves, probably could have ended up incarcerated. And so I'm really emboldened by some of the legislation and some of the things that's going on, because when I got out, it was $40 to figure it out, you know, and so that's a recipe for reincarceration, for recidivism. You know, and I love what the Journey Project's doing. I love what, you know, a lot of the other speakers are doing in the community, because, you know, $2.3 billion a year on just locking people up is not the answer. You know, we have to support people, you know, and reentry really does start when you get locked up. But I'm glad people are, you know, legislators and people that can make a difference are talking reentry, because I was talking it 20 years ago, because I saw a father, a grandfather, and a son all in the same institution. And so something sparked in me that I want to see these cycles of anger, addiction, and incarceration broken. They have so many families held in bondage. And so we started, you know, every dollar you spend on education, you save 2 on corrections. And so we started programs that were educating people and getting them ready for the streets, you know, and so before it was even a thing, who knew? And so that's what we do right now. House of Mercy is not just housing, but we really are helping with food, clothing, transportation, employment opportunities. We just were blessed with the Department of Commerce grant to do digital navigation workshops and give free laptops, because a lot of people out here, I don't care if you did a year or 38 years like I did, technology can be overwhelming, right? I mean, I would ask how many people have been schemed, hacked, or taken advantage of online, but you know, I probably get a straighter answer. I said, how many people know somebody that have been schemed, hacked, or taken advantage of online? You know, and a lot of people coming out don't realize when you hit post or send or like on something, you know, you're leaving a permanent digital footprint. You know, that not only your future employer, your CCO, your future wife, you know, see, but everybody sees. It doesn't go away. And so, but if you haven't had that training, and I came out from the 210 can and the string, you know, technology, or the rotary. Some of you youngsters are saying rotary, well, what is that? But you know, and so technology was number one. Unfortunately, I have a 9-year-old granddaughter who's amazing. She's my tech advisor. So I was able to navigate that, but a lot of people don't have that. And one of the big things too is mental health. You know, most people that go to prison, they go for one reason, wrong way of thinking. And so there's so much undiagnosed and underdiagnosed mental health that we're dealing with. We see it every day when we drive on the streets, you know, and it comes all kind of forms and fashions. And if we don't address that and offer some help for that, we're just going to continue, you know, these cycles of get out, get in trouble, and get locked back up. And so, you know, thank you guys. I really am honored to be standing here today. We need more houses. You know, we have 27 houses, but I could fill 20 more houses. And it's not just justice impacted, but, you know, homelessness and addiction and incarceration, they all go hand in hand. And so we could use 20 more houses, you know, but it's just finding somebody that's willing to take a chance on us, because we have an amazing reputation as a program. Our recidivism rate isn't 0, but out of the 5,000+ people that have come through our program in the last 15 years, I think 2 people have reincarcerated. When the national recidivism rate is 53%, yeah, that tells you that, you know, structured, supportive, sense of community programs are making a difference in recidivism. Because if I was to ask half the room to stand up and say that if all of you were just recently released in the next year, half of the room would go back to prison. That's a problem, y'all. That's a problem. We got to do something about that. Just throwing money at it is not the answer. You got to come alongside. You got to see a person, hear a person. You know, when I was in 3rd grade, you know, we used to live across from McNeil Island, and I never thought in a million years I'd ever end up in prison. Matter of fact, when I read the newspaper that they were playing baseball and had these things going on in there, my first reaction was, why aren't they making big rocks into little rocks? You know, because I didn't know. And then I get locked up and I find out this is just people that made a mistake in life. Really gifted, talented, amazing people that just need a hand up, that just need a second chance or a third chance, because not everybody gets recovery right the first time, right?
You know, they just need somebody to be in the fight with them, to see them, to hear them, to help them. You know, and that's what we all are here to do, I believe. That's why you guys came. You didn't come here just for, you know, some candy back in that bowl back there at the House of Mercy table, you know, some free food and some beverages. You came here because you want to make a difference in your community. And so I really am, you know, encouraged by that. So thank you for being here, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak, because we are making a difference, you know, and I want to put DOC out of business. I'm sorry. I do. I want to put them out of business. And the last time legislation, because, you know, people are going back to jail, community supervision, and I'm not on a high horse anywhere. I understand it serves a purpose, but when a person can get locked back up for having a phone or being in a wrong county, or, you know, whatever it is, it's not even a new crime. How is justice served in that? How are taxpayer dollars being well spent on that? You know, so thank you guys for giving me this opportunity, and God bless everybody.
All right, next up, I'd like to invite one of our participants in our program. His name is Manny Love. He's gonna give a little bill.
Thanks, John. I just want to first start by saying that I appreciate everybody being here, especially who advocates for people who are justice impacted, and that you know, reentry is a process. It's a tough process. I especially appreciate your passion, Mrs. Claire Wilson. Very touched by what you said. Just your passion for reform. You as well. The work that you've done and advocating for people and everything. It does mean a lot. Journey's been huge for me these last 3 months. I've been out about 3 months now, and I remember upon getting out, filling out the packet and reading everything, all the guidelines and all the rules and everything, and feeling how kind of restrictive it seemed like it would be. But in my heart, I knew that's what I needed, because I've been in and out of prison for 10 years, and I've tried reentry twice on my own. And the last time that I was out, I only lasted 3 months. And so what I knew was that something that had changed. Addiction had been a big thing for me too, right? And so like, I know Tom was talking about the blackout period. I was kind of getting cabin fever during that. I was kind of itching, right? Because I owed $1,500 charge before I got about what I was going to do and who I was going to see, do all this and that. And that blackout period really allowed me to just kind of sit down and reset. And yeah, it was kind of binding and it was irritating, but at the end of the day, that's what I needed. But more so than anything, the Journey Project really cares. Like, these guys really, really care about what we got going on in our lives. Tom didn't have to take me to college, right? He gave me a ride to college to LSW. He took me there. Through the college, I signed up. Through LSW, I signed up for college. I've been taking welding classes. I got straight A's right now. That course. I graduated LSW last quarter. All the staff you see here came, as well as came back there and some of my housemates. I mean, that level of support, that was huge for me, you know, especially because like I broke in a lot of the trust and love that like with my family, because all the times, all the talk that I was always good at talking about what I was going to do and everything and getting their hopes up, and I just let them down. And they were there too. And finally, you know, I gave them the chance to be a part of something that I had going on that was positive and be proud of me, right? And but all of this really is a testament to my foundation, and my foundation was the Journey Project. You know, and another thing too that was kind of glossed over that I can tell you about firsthand experience is that from leadership down, the environment in the house and the positivity, that's from leadership, right? We have this house manager who's super cool. Like, could have been here. His name's Pat, but he kind of like fuels everybody, right? With encouragement, positivity. He comes back every single night and checks in with everybody, how their day was. You know, what are you going through? He's there to, you know, just there for us. And from leadership down, it's just a positive household. I can't wait to come home after work, right? There's always food being cooked by somebody, you know, and it's just a great environment. And I can't say enough about what the Journey Project's done for me. I've been able to, like I said, go to school, pay off my debt, now build my credit because I recently bought a car. But so like everything's coming together for me slowly, but it's coming. And it's been huge for me. So I definitely appreciate Journey. I appreciate everybody here advocating for the justice impacted. It really does mean a lot to have people believe in you believe that you aren't your past, believe that you, believe in giving you a second chance, believe that you can overcome your past. So it's huge, and I appreciate everybody, so thank you.
All right, finally, I'd like to call up our Tukwila Council member, Kate Kruller.
Hello, everyone. The mayor got the opportunity to thank you all for being here in our city, and I feel the same way. I'm in a room full of the Better Angel Society right here. I can't say enough. I'll get all misty here in a few minutes, but when I met Ed and a couple other guys a long time ago, it was just at a restaurant, and we were meeting in a conference room in the back. And you know, Ed and guys, it was a little shabby, but it was home to us who were trying to save our municipal pool. And you made us welcome, and you made friends with us, and we made friends with you, and then I can fast forward, there was somebody wanted to have a pride event, and so it was the first one ever in Tukwila. Guess who were the inspirators to that? And then all of a sudden, friends closed, and we went through a period where we just lost touch. But what I see and know and a part of and supporting is the Journey Project was already underway. They just found new ways to evolve, make change, and help people. Every one of us, I just want y'all to give yourself a little applause for even being here. I'm impressed they were. I know you all have a part in, programs and processes and things, but I'm gonna make a little teeny ask. The teeny ask is you'll open up this envelope that's been around you, and you'll look inside, you'll take a look at this little QR code. And it'll take you to a chance where you can donate. And if you don't have the means, hang on to the envelope and take someone that does, your mom, your cousin, your neighbor, somebody who cares, that you can make and ask for and help this project flourish. I just want to make sure that there's always a way, even if you don't have change in your life. I don't think there's a person in this room, I know I'm not, that hasn't been pulled over by a police officer, done something wrong when you're little, that you've never confessed or whatever, but every one of us is human. And every one of us makes mistakes, and some of them get called, and systemically, some more than others, unjustly are called on it. And well, in my heart, I didn't think about splitting rocks. In my heart, you pay your debt to society and it's over, right? No. Apparently it's there for the rest of your life. Every time I run for office, any little thing I've ever done wrong comes right up, even parking fines. So it's just fascinating how people will lord that over you. And I have checked the history of the people who accuse, you will find that their house is made of glass as well. So I just come in the room humble. I come in the room feeling that everyone in the room here is better than me. That's how I feel. I respect you. God made you. I hate to go religious on you, but God made you, at least the Bible really did. And you are precious and valuable in the sight of God. So don't let anyone ever make you feel less. I hear that you get like 19 disappointments before you get a positive. That's a really sad stat because most of us should be elevating and uplifting and asking people how to help. Or at least just say, isn't it a great day? I'm going to tell you a dumb story. Once I lost a job at a TV station in Seattle, and I lost it during lunch hour when I was supposed to finish my shift. So I went outside, I was with Ray during the conversation, and I went down the street and I needed to go find a place to cry, and I almost got to a point, a couple houses, 3 houses away from this place downtown Seattle. Just as I was gonna let it go, out this doorway comes somebody who was a paraplegic in a power wheelchair. I immediately sucked it up because he said, "What a beautiful day it is today. How are you doing?" Like, I'm good. You know? And I mustered through and I walked past and I said to myself, what is my problem? Why am I sad? And I found out one thing. If I ever lost a job or an opportunity or something, got in trouble, it always is better later. Just let it happen. Let your life roll out. And I always end up in a better place than I started. And sometimes, hey, whatever force, I say it's God, I call it providence, wants me out of that situation into that next one, not necessarily make my life better, it might be to make someone else's life better. But I'm supposed to be where I'm at all the time, and I think you are too. I'm grateful to be in the room with you today. So thank you all. Give yourselves another round of applause. Yeah, this country is the work, it's some amazing people who are turning lives around, not just their own, but everyone around them every day, and you are my angels.
All right, next, we're gonna give some opportunity for people that want to ask questions to our panel or others that are in the room. So if you have a question,
Thank you. So my name's Carl. Now I can thank you guys for showing up today. It's very beneficial. So. Let's see, I have a couple degrees, one, AA for law, I have a parametric degree from Children's College. I'm a business owner, I do a full-time job. But I'm also a lifetime, supervision for lifetime. So, I was coming here to ask you guys to sponsor this hearing, you're going to do that, but thank you for that. This is needed. I've been on supervision for 10 years now. Never a violation. But I still have to deal with, can you lift your mic up, please? I still have to deal with the DOC on a monthly basis, and that's a stressful situation. We have to go in, we don't know what they're gonna say, what they're gonna do. I'm a homeowner, but that home was taken away through a threat. Just because I protect my liberty interests. And just based on that, he said, well, we haven't moved yet. I go mad. So these are the things that we deal with on a daily basis. There's just recently had a question where he didn't like the answer. So, I had to deal with that. It's just a constant anxiety, the stress. And it's just really difficult to keep going forward. And I've been out for a while, and to just constantly be reminded of your past like that was really hard. And so I just want to thank you, and I hope that you go forward with sponsoring that bill. Don't let the doubters distract you from that. And I'll be down there talking if I get to.
Hi, my name is Tara Huggins, and I'm a social worker, licensed clinical social worker. I'm a United States Army veteran, and really grateful to be here today. I had the one question I had is sort of tied to this bill that you wanted to support. It's related to the bill, sir, that you were speaking to. You made a remark about judges having discretion regarding sentences. That concerns me. It's not explicit enough. People have bias. I was in the United States Army, and as a clinical social worker, I treated excess diagnosed and treated mental health disorders that are service members and their family members. So I'm a little nervous. Worked with a great number of sexually offended individuals. And one of the challenges in the United States Army's or not just the Army, but the military system of justice, is this caveat called command discretion, where justice is actually not necessarily served because the interpretation of command discretion is broad. And that discretion has created a lot of challenges. And I don't know the exact answer here, but I'm curious what that means when you say the judge has the discretion on sentences, because from person to person that can look quite different, judge to judge, because the reality is we all have our own biases. And that is one of the things that really can interfere. And life isn't fair, right? We have one person who is convicted of a crime who gets a maximum sentence, where the other person has a different experience, right? Where things work a little bit maybe more in their favor. So that just concerns me, and I'd like to speak to that, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm glad you brought that up. Our current sentencing system, the state, gives judges no discretion. The prosecutors have all the discretion right now. The prosecutors have discretion whether or not to charge, what to charge. When they get into the plea negotiations and the room with the seats, the prosecutors have all the power. So they know. Because 95% of the cases are fled out. We had trials for every case that would shut the whole system down. And a number of times defense attorneys said, okay, we're just gonna have trials. You know, when we're engaged in our legislative work. So it is important to balance discretion. And right now it's out of balance. And so our sentencing system needs to. So instead of a hydraulic discretion, it's like a balloon, where you squeeze the balloon, the other one blows up. And so we need to take some of the discretion away from prosecutors, give them to the judges on a case-by-case basis. Now, if you give judges discretion or any discretion, there are going to be disparities in how those cases solve. So similarly situated individuals will get different results because of the bias, usually implicit bias that the judge had. Prosecutors have bias, we're all have bias, right? So what we need to do in transforming the sentencing system, in addition to giving judges more discretion, we want judges to take a look at the individual, the circumstances of the case, and tailor the response rather than one size fits all. One size fits one, that's the way to argue. But there's going to be bias. There are going to be, in particular, people of color who don't get the alternative, you get a longer sentence, you get that enhancement on top of this. This is what the data shows. We'll also have those who commit offenses of gender-based violence who will be receive less accountability. This is what we're seeing. We're seeing other disparities of crimes against women are not dealt with as seriously as they should be. You just raised, however, an issue I never thought. That is those who are accused of convicted of sex offenses. The bias there. How do we mitigate against that? Whether the judge makes a decision. So I haven't figured that out yet. But with regard to ethnic, racial disparities, I think I have. If you could, and this is very easy to do, you could gather data county by county, and in Oregon, they do this very granular. We can inform the judges, inform all the players in the system in that county about racial disparities. And have it like on a card, the judge is going to be reminded that sentencing practices are not fair. And if a particular case falls outside of that range, the county, then the defendant would be able to appeal the sentence. If that sentence was not fair because it was racially discriminatory. It's never been done in this country. But I think that would be a mechanism used to guide discretion of judges. We need to give judges more discretion, but to protect against their bias using their discretion in a disparate way, we have to demonstrate and give the defendant, or the person convicted at that point, the ability to appeal their sentence because the sentence falls outside of the range in that locality. So I'm not sure if I described it well, but with sex offenses, well, how do we do that? How do we come up with a mitigating measure to make sure that there aren't disparities in sentencing because we're giving judges?
I could say even that just generally in the legal system, the discretion piece and that bias that we're talking about is a challenge.
Yeah.
We can have advisory for checks and balances. No discretion. One individual.
Yeah.
Too much power in one individual.
Right.
It's where we run into challenges over and over again.
So, too much power in one individual right now in this state. Excuse me, too much.
And I do think this.
But we do have to sort of step back, macro view of structural institutional racism. We have communities that have been intentionally deprived of opportunities for generations, for centuries. Those are communities that are prone to disorder. So police and the public, they look, oh, that's a place, those dangerous people. No, these are people who are surviving and taking measures in their own hands because there's no collective efficacy. That's as a result of racism. It's baked into the DNA of this country. So that's another thing we have to take into consideration. That no matter how much we try to make the system fair, it's going to be discretion on the street of police, discretion of the business owner doesn't want that person in front of the, in front of the shop. So it's never gonna be perfect, but I do wanna transform our sentencing system so that it's more balanced. And then has mitigating measures against racial discrimination.
Thank you.
What was it again? Fred wants to see.
Yeah, something real fast. I have two great nephews. Co-defendants, same crime. They were juveniles when they committed their crime. They were 19 when they were charged. Two separate prosecutors. Both pled guilty because they knew they were guilty. One prosecutor, one of my great nephews, okay, you were a juvenile, will seek juvenile sentence. The other prosecutor, no, you're now an adult. We're gonna ask for an adult sentence. The one with the juvenile sentence got a year and a day, which means 8 months of incarceration at Greenville. The other one got 10 years up Coyote Ridge. Now, the judges had their own, sense of who we elect. And anybody that, follows the judicial system can still support or not. But that's the difference. And so I got one nephew out running around doing his thing and doing good. And the other one still incarcerated with another 4 to 5 years to go. That's the importance of judges having discretion. Because it just hurts me that, wow, do they deserve to take a little time out and reevaluate their life, where they're at? Yes. Just as I did. Took me 4 times. Different crime every time, 4 fraud to carrying a gun. To finally get in my head, what am I going to do? How am I going to live my life? In prison or out here? You see, the judges have discretion. Well, and we have the reentry set up. So the day I went in, after I got out of the military, I served from 71 to 76. I got out when I was 17, got out, as an adult, but still a child. And I spent many a year, even educated, going in and out of prison. So that's where it's important that judges have the discretion and not the prosecutor.
Questions for Brad. Brad, we talked a lot about the PBC. I represent the DOJ, and I'm just wondering what are the differences between the two in terms of restrictions, registration, and supervision of those requirements? How do they differ? Is one more restrictive than the other? Are there more responsibility on behalf of the client?
So you're talking about, you say DOJ, in other words, the federal system, right?
Yeah.
So you're asking me. Is this for me?
Yeah.
You're asking me what's the difference for somebody when they re-enter the community between coming out of state prison or coming out of federal?
Correct.
Well, federal prison usually means they were there longer. So they've got the consequences of that to deal with. But in federal prison, even for sex offenses, they almost inevitably spend the last 6 months of their sentence community in the halfway house. The feds, as we've said earlier today, have the money. And so my clients who come out of the federal system go into a halfway house. And by the time they're released from that, they found work, they found housing, they've had an opportunity to transition. That halfway house that most of my clients end up in about 3 blocks from my office on First Hill in Seattle, so it's centrally located. And there are a lot of real benefits for them. Registration requirements for a federal event are set by SORNA, and they tend to be longer than the state amounts, but not necessarily. It depends on the events. It's either 15, 25, or light. for federal registration. For state clients who come out, you know, one of the things that's changed is the housing voucher program. When I first started representing people accused of sex offenses, most of my clients maxed out their sentence, didn't get their good time because they couldn't come up with an approved address. EOC wouldn't approve their release plan. And so they didn't get any good time. If you had a sex offense, you spent the whole time there. And then you were released to the streets. There wasn't anything for you. And so the department now has the voucher program, which has made a huge difference in people's ability to get out the door. As you can imagine, not housing somebody for 1/3 of their sentence longer to max them out just because you won't approve their address is no way to save money. And so the housing program saved a lot of money. You know, what the feds do is they take the cream off the top state system to hire for federal probation officers and at every level of the federal system. So in the federal system, I work with people who are professionals, who are friendly, who are direct, who are amazing, and they really provide a great service to those clients when they're released. In the state system, not so much. And in fact, the culture in the Department of Corrections in the 27 years I've been practicing criminal law in this state has only gotten worse. It's become a law enforcement culture. Too many
Federal system a little less restricted or a little less
more
oversight.
random, dealing with people who are batshit crazy and in charge of your life. I'm sorry, but Carl just said there is an understatement. He's trying to be reasonable because he doesn't want you guys to think he's crazy. But the truth is, you know, there's the you're my bitch phase, which is the first thing that happens. And you heard about that dominance that try to establish. And when you have 20 CCOs, as somebody just said, going through the you're my bitch phase, where you can't see your children, you can't go anywhere, you can't get a travel permit, you can't blah, 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 on down the line. I've had clients who work as a painter, a house painter, for years. Suddenly they get a new CCO and they're in prison, they're in jail with 7 violations on their SOSA because they had incidental contact with minors in the course of their employment, which was approved by the prior CCO. And now 12 years into their SOSA, they're trying to revoke it. And what I tell my clients is people who fail the psychological test from law enforcement can still get a job as correctional. Yes. And so I'm sorry to say that, but I see that over and over and over again. And I think that the Department of Corrections culture in many of their offices is, you know, they play this game of how many people can be put back in prison. They're not anybody's friend. I had a case recently in the county north of here where the DOC officer tried to put my client in prison while trying to get my client's wife to let him talk to her in his private home and pursuing a relationship. I see all kinds of things. And I hesitate to speak as frankly as I am right now, but you asked a question. And the truth is that our community is at risk because people who shouldn't be in those positions of power are abusing that power. You know, people who are hurt people who heal people, someone said earlier today. And our corrections culture is profoundly flawed. And we will find many officers who, if they are given a private opportunity, will tell you that. But because of that culture, now I have way too time. I have to tell you. Well, you know, I have clients who have a choice. Go more on right now. Do you want to go into the federal system or should we agree to the state system? And the answer is always bring me to federal prison.
My experience of working with my clients with DOJ is and a lot of them have state charges as well. Is that DOC is not in the rehabilitation business, they're in the business of punishment. And they're very good at it. Whereas the DOJ and DOP, we really want to see our speak.
And that's been my experience. You know, The philosophy, the two main philosophies are managed by conditions. Here's a strict list of conditions. You follow to the letter. If not, it's a violation, you go to jail. Or there's case management. You step people down. You give them greater responsibilities. You allow them to have set goals and move toward those goals and achieve greater freedoms, etc. But in the department, what happens is there's these strict conditions. The person starts to relax. Then the new CCO comes in, it's the you're my bitch phase. You know, the chrono notes weren't very good, so none of those privileges exist anymore. And you're right back to a destabilized, you know, that's when the voice in the head starts to say, heck it, right? What have I got to lose? And how many of us have talked to somebody about that moment when they made that decision to relapse, to reoffend, to, you know, tear off their ankle bracelet and flee to Brazil, whatever, you know, and it's that voice in the head that starts with that idea that I can't get fair treatment, I can't get ahead, there's no hope for me now. I have so many clients, I talk to them and I wonder if I were them, if I would commit suicide. And that's what I, so I do the work I do. I'll tell you a quick story. First meeting I went to as the sex offender advisory group in 2007 for Governor Gregoire. The question was posed about risk for sex offenders and about what reduces their risk. And I made the point that it's stability, it's employment, it's housing, it's giving these people hope in a life that means that they can re-enter our communities. That's how they're going to sit. And the woman who was then the head of the Washington State Institute of Public Policy raised. And she said, well, you know, I read all the studies and I don't agree. She says, you know, a child molester has to have a house in order to offend against a child. So what she was saying, this person of great power, was that if we keep them homeless, then at least they can't offend against a child. And in a moment a little like this one, I spoke very frankly. I said, I am going to be in every one of these meetings because of people like you. What you just said was morally reprehensible. I called her out so big, she wouldn't look me in the eye for the next 5 years. But I was at every one of those meetings to say, we can't dehumanize. We can't say things like that. You said that in public. You know, later she tried to tell people it was a joke. Oh, you know, how many of you think that's fun? So anyway, that I can get a little too passionate sometimes, but it just pisses me, you know. So here I am. Thank you.
Can I just say something? Somebody talked about constituents and how important that was and voting or, you know, knowing who your constituents are, who represents you. But I would also say there are often times that those that are elected do not represent you. And when you come to try to have a conversation with them, they will not see you. And so I think it's also important to know there are those of us that do represent folks outside a legislative district that represent you because of who you are, because of the lack of that support that's happened, whether you identify or whether you are one of those justice involved individuals, you may not find somebody who is in support of that. And I think it's really important just to know that. For me, I meet with anybody, none of these folks live in my community, but I meet with them because who they are and the work they do is so incredibly important. And I just want to make sure that even if you get a no from someone from where you live, don't take that no as nobody cares. Take that no, and then I'll go on to the next person and I'll have that conversation with them. And then the only other thing I want you all to know is that your voices are incredibly important. We do have the ability for virtual testimony. And we haven't had that before because of the pandemic. We now do, where from any space and any place, you have the opportunity to testify in front of committees around pieces of legislation that are important to you. And you can also meet with your electeds by setting up time with them, because again, your voices are incredibly important, and that So that's who you represent. And you are those people. So I just really, it's so important. And the only other thing is when we talk institution, that's what makes change so difficult. Because you can be a superintendent of a school district, or you can be a superintendent of an institution, and you cannot simply know what's happening behind every single door. And even if your head and your heart, you want something to go one way, oftentimes you start peeling an onion and you find there are many things that are happening furthest away from the heart of where an organization or an agency might be, that is not representative of the values and the mission of that agency. And that's, I think, the part that makes it so incredibly difficult. I know as a teacher, it was years before anybody ever opened my classroom door to find out if I was helping kids or if I might be doing this. You know, and I think the same can be said for our institutions. So I think voices and truth is incredibly important. And as long as the voice and truth is the same voice and truth, you stay in every room and it doesn't change. But who's in the room, you think that's what's important.
Mac Beebe is the DOC representative on the Sex Offender Policy Board. He heads the Community Corrections Division. He's an amazing man who is trying very hard and has the best of intentions. So they are working right now on that cultural change. And I'm already starting to see and hear from my clients evidence that it's starting to work, the training is starting to kick in. So I speak with some bitterness from past experience, but I also want to acknowledge, as Senator Wilson just did, that the people at the top get it. You know, I've spoken as frankly to them as I did here today. So I hold dearly that you say what you're going to say. And I give them great credit and I think they're trying. So I just want to have.
I'm gonna pop up really quick. Thanks. Again, Noelle Frame for those of you who I didn't get to meet earlier, just served 7 years in the House and just joined the Senate last year. I just have to remark, Roger and Claire, I can't not saying it. I've had a couple people said today, federal government has big money, it's too expensive. For the love of God, people, this is one of the most states in the nation. Yeah. We have the data.
Yeah.
Don't ever accept that as an answer, like, oh, we don't have money, we have the data. And so always fight for your cause, because we're making a choice about where we put our dollars. And the reality is, Claire and I are not on the Ways and Means Committee. We just got Tara Simmons. We just got her on Ways and Means in this session. Like, we need more advocates for justice reform in the room when fiscal decisions are made. And so I'll be fighting to the death to get on Ways and Means with hopefully opening in the next couple of months. And what I invite you all to do to help us is, those of you who are tracking these processes in closer than we are on the money, help us be your advocates for the money. The second thing I'll say is, we have the money and we could have more if we choose to tax people who actually have money. We have 100 billionaires that live in Washington State. We choose not to ask them to pay their taxes. So if anybody wants to nerd out on how to join the fight for tax reform, I am your dear friend, not only justice advocate, but I know where the money is. And welcome your support in getting them to pay what they owe, so that we can pay for what our communities need. And the last thing I just want to echo, and I see hand, maybe it's for me. What Claire said, I often say we represent our districts, but we serve the entire state of Washington. And know that you can come to us even if you don't live in the zip codes in our legislative boundaries. We are obviously the people who sit on these committees who are fighting for this, have spent a career fighting for this, and we want to know your stories. But wherever we have that data, bring it, because man, Brad, when you came in on 1394 and you're like, hey, legislature, you asked SOPP to tell you what to do. Here's the answer, now go do it. And PS, the data is irrefutable. There is no evidence to support your current public policy. Do the work and actually change it. It was bipartisan. We got people to come along with us because we're like, you can think all you want. You can have your emotional reaction to what you feel about sex offenses in this case, but the data doesn't support your position. So if you're actually interested in stopping child abuse, for instance, you'll support my bill. And people are just like, so bring that data, because if that paired with the personal stories helps. So I thought maybe it was for me.
Yeah, I just want to know your name.
Oh, I'm Noelle Frame, and I'm the state senator from the 36th district, which is the northwest corner of the city of Seattle. And I mostly, my book of business has mostly been juvenile justice reform. But in joining Players Human Services Committee in the Senate, I'm now in the portfolio on adult corrections and rehabilitation too. I never got the opportunity to serve on Rogers Committee. I was always on the committee that did juvenile work. And P.S. I'll just put a special thanks. When I first joined the legislature in 2016, 17, I was like, I'm this new person who's looking for something to do. And Roger Goodman goes, hey, do you want to take my spot in the Partnership Council for Juvenile Justice? And I was like, sure, that sounds good, sir. Thank you very much. Roger and I have been in the trenches for 7 years together and have passed some pretty good works. We got more work. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Alex Mayo. I'm the Executive Director of Washington Voices. I'm so privileged to be here today, so thank you for having me. We are an organization that advocates for individuals that are forced to register, whether that is because of a sex offense or because of kidnapping. In the States, we don't want to forget our individuals that have a kidnapping offense. I want to say that I am a person that is required to register, but I'm not a sex offender. And I'm not a sex offender because I understand the power of words. And when you understand that words and access to words influences the way that you think, and when you understand that the way you think influences what you do, the actions that you take, you will realize that we need to be supporting people with words that help them to take actions that are helpful, that prevent sexual harm, that prevent other acts of violence. And calling people sex offenders is wrong fundamentally. And so that's why I choose not to call things sex offender. I try to use people first language. So we do have something that is called the Sex Offender Policy Board, and you will hear me refer to it as the Sex Offense Policy Board. And I do that on purpose because I believe that the words that I use, the way that I think influences my action. So therefore, I am choosing to use words that are going to help me and help others to take the actions that we want them to take. And so I just appreciate every single person in here. And I want to say that I'm going to be donating $100 to the Journey Project. So I know that not everyone has the opportunity and the ability to do that. I just want to encourage, if you have $5, to please use that QR code and donate today. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Olson. I'm the policy manager for the Civil Survival Project. And the one thing this is actually going out to all the legislators. I think it would be great if, I know you guys do work sessions before the legislation, before session starts. It'd be really great to have a reentry session. It's so hard to, not everybody's legislator listens to them. And it's also so hard in hearing when you only get 2 minutes or 60 seconds to tell your stories. And we know how important our stories are. And I think it would be really great to work with you all to have a work session where maybe some of the other members who are not as friendly toward our causes or the other side of the aisle could be maybe forced to listen to it a little bit. So would love to work with you all to try to have a work session before the next one.
Well, and I so totally second your motion, but I would say a session is not a time to have a deep, in-depth conversation because things happen in 15-minute increments, and that's literally how they happen. The interim, which is right now, is the time when the deep conversations, when visiting places and spaces, when talking to groups of people, it happens. And that's why we're here today. That's why we're able to be here today. So, and as a chair, it's incredibly important as we move forward. That's something we can do during committee days or something we can do. We're limited how many we can have and when we can have them. But would love to talk more and continue to talk. I know we're also doing stakeholder in my work as a chair. I stood stakeholder, all of the buckets, if you will, of work that happens in my committee throughout the interim and then on a bi-weekly basis during session. And a lot of these folks have come into that role, but we're gonna create a whole nother stakeholder group in particular for those that are just as involved, so we make sure we got that voice and that representation. I would also say during the interim, I know our entire committee is taking a visit to the east side of the state. We're gonna be at WSP, so State Penitentiary, but also looking at all the reentry services and supports, the STD and the ODP programs over on the east side to see what that reentry looks like and to see what that support looks like, as well as working with the Wellwell School District to think about, for me, institutional as well, what's happening with our young people in juvenile justice. And also thinking about late decision which we just passed, thinking about harm reduction and all of those things. Again, what are those supports that are either in place or need to be in place as we think about accessing and providing successful reentry opportunities for folks. So let's continue to talk, because that's an important thing. We love it.
I have one question. So all of us have problems here. We work with people, we see where the law policy is working. What is the best way to either change the law or the process of at least getting it to somebody to get it fixed?
Something like. What I would say is I listen to people. So we were just sitting here and my dear friend Alex just talked about sex offense policy bill. Also, we were just talking about how you expand membership perhaps in the council. And so one of the things was like, heck, we could drop the bill to add Washington Voices, and at the same time, you could say, we'd like to change the name of that group from sex offender to sex offense. That's what I'm saying. Ideas don't come from the inside. They come from the outside. You know, that's where those things come from. If you've got an idea or you know there's something that isn't working, meet with one of us. And what I do is then I have a conversation and then I go to my policy staff and I say, has anybody ever done this before? And what do you know about this? And then we come together. And then I probably would talk to my chair over in the other chamber and say, what do you think about this? Or do you know anything? Or are you doing something? But the bill and the ideas, the language, you don't have to worry about. You know, it's the ideas and the intent and the impact that you worry about, that we have a conversation about. And then we create, and with support of policy staff who have way more brains than I do in that legal sense, turn things into that legalese, if you will, and then we work together.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is because people do that, we tend to know what's happening out there and who's working on what. So one of the best things that we can do is connect you with other groups who are already kind of thinking about it or are adjacent. So that you can do the work of building coalition. And insofar as it's possible to bring sort of the other side along with you and work out some of those differences before we ever get to the legislative session with the prosecutors, with the judges, et cetera. It doesn't always happen, but trying in the interim, so we know eyes wide open what we're walking into, even if we know we're gonna have to fight to that.
And that's why I do my stakeholder.
Yeah,
So
so we
I
can
do
actually-
that with you and that everyone knows and we can leverage and support the work that's happening together. Yep. Yeah.
I would also add that you can just hit us up too.
Yes.
Because we're always willing to support as well as help you power build around those issues. So please hit us up.
I've already talked to Tara about getting these guys on board. She wants to drop a bill already. And name change.
These are good ideas. The word offender, we all hate. First of all, 40,000 times in the codes. So we try to come up with something: incarcerated individual, which is a lot of syllables, prisoner, you know, what do we do? But we could actually do a bill with the word offender, like a program, like sex offense, often word, drug, and sentencing alternative. So we could change the name of all the offenses to take the offender out. Yes, for Kelly. Session either in October or on reentry and corrections, so we're going to have in depth Maybe we could do a joint, just like that. That would be great.
Sessions.
We'll be in touch.
Well, if you go on to the legislative website, and if you have a committee that you're interested in, or if you have a bill that you're interested in, you can sign up and it'll send you emails and send you, info when it's up, when it's gonna be in committee and stuff. You could also get a hold of your friends here who also track bills. Civil Survival does, and a number of groups do, and they've got social
We send
media.
out emails.
Right, find yourself. That's fine, so connect with these guys, it's probably the best way to go.
Now that I'm a little more calmed down, I just wanted to reiterate, Anthony's statement earlier about the Vanderbox issue. They just kicked the football down the field. Multiple times I was offered jobs. Multiple times they got denied afterwards. Capital Hill Housing, commissions. That's it. I worked as a temp for a year at an office. Once I went to go get hired, then all of a sudden I couldn't move. And so it just kicked the football down the field.
And that getting, that walk of shame, 1 week after you get hired, the security shows up and walks you off the property. That is a profoundly discouraging event in someone's life. So to the extent that you sort of lull somebody into this false sense of security, they get that job offer and then they have that experience after having quit another job. You know, giving somebody half a solution sometimes pushes them off. Well,
Yes, I did many years as a temp because I could do all that stuff. But, going that extra step, I was lucky enough to find somebody who knew about Reentry and then give me time. Now I work from home here, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, that needs to change. And I think that even though I don't like Seattle that much, they did have some of the policies that are good, like second chance salaries. Not looking past 2 years in your criminal history, or it's past, it's for the last 2 years, on, those things work. But it only works for the city of Seattle. And so that's what needs to come up to state level. Across the state.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm also in calmer now. So many things have come up that I wanted to say and actually put out there. So on January 25th, my friend Randy Fleck, who was at E8 and first sergeant in the United States Army, his life. I was his friend, but I was also initially his treatment provider. He had a significant case of PTSD and also TBI. The day that he took his life, the prosecutor on the case in which he was alleged to have made a sex offense, I appreciate your words about the power of language. Because the moment that that allegation was made, this man was treated like a criminal and he hadn't even stood trial. And the allegations came down during the height of COVID. And so the situation was quite protracted. And he was in Michigan, he was in Presque Isle, which was off the mainland of Michigan. So a very protracted situation, and his PTSD was uncontrolled. I was supporting him from a distance, having been his former provider, but also his battle. And myself, in concert with his brother, who is a U.S. Marshal, who lives here in Puyallup, were campaigning to bring him home to get care at American Lake. The court had, so there was no trial date set. This was a 2-year period of time. He was alleged to have offended. And because of his PTSD diagnosis, he was given a evaluation, court-appointed evaluation, mental status, but basically a mental status exam for fitness to stand trial. The interesting thing about that is that this man who was never incarcerated or put in jail and was waiting to stand trial, who never hid from the circumstances ever, was put in an orange suit and given a mental status evaluation in a prison cell. And so for a gentleman with PTSD, you can imagine how reactive he might be. and how he didn't necessarily serve himself well in that experience. So my point is a couple things. One, I think how we talk about it is important from the beginning. Someone meets the justice system throughout whatever happens. So him having allegedly offended, he was treated like an offender from the moment that alleged, that allegation was logged. And, for a man of his status and his experience, 24 years of service brought every man home, literally, and every badge and honor and mark he could give. There was no way he was going to jail. And he was doing the honorable thing. So the language we use important. I think also I admit as a Washington resident, due to my moves, I'm not up to speed on the laws here, but I'm curious if we do mental status exams in prison cells and in orange suits for someone who isn't yet incarcerated, and if we do, that's really not a good idea. I campaigned to bring him home to get him stabilized through a letter. I was not speaking to his offenses. I spoke nothing about that. I just advocated for him as a mental health professional and spoke to the facts of his diagnosis and my perception, my clinical impression that he was not fit to stand trial. And the request for us was for us to bring him here to be stabilized. And mind you, the trial date had not been set. The day that the prosecutor decided to say no to my request was the day that my friend took his life. So these are just some things to think about. I don't know, you all have far more expertise, Brad. You blow my mind, and I'm so grateful we have it. I have sat on both sides of this. I have advocated for those who have allegedly offended. I have advocated for those who have been offended. I myself have. I see things from a very holistic perspective. I truly agree with statements made today. Those who have been hurt tend to want to hurt, and those who have been healed will heal. Coming from a place of empathy and open-mindedness and knowing that we are all biased, I think is really important for us to maintain that awareness as we move forward, campaigning, for the rights of those who have been impacted by injustice. So thank you for the opportunity to speak and think about some of the things I said as it related to my friend and so many like him. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jack Garland. I work at Near Seattle. We're advocacy organization and support organization in Seattle. First off, I want to thank the Journey Project for centering trans people and talking about their services. I think for a lot of organizations, that kind of talk is performative or incidental, so I really appreciated that. I was supposed to come today with someone who was scheduled to be released on Monday after 13 years of incarceration, who I think some of you will probably have met. I know Senator Wilson, they've had many discussions with a legislative assistant of yours, and I think spoken with you personally. And yeah, at the very end of last week, days before they were scheduled to be released, they were essentially railroaded. And they'll be tied up for an indefinite period of time, definitely years. And in addition to that, like at our organization over the past couple of years, we have seen, trans person after trans person come out and like excel in every way, meet all requirements, and then there'll be a shift in CCO and they'll get violated time and time again, and they'll get, put back in the system or put back in incarceration. And I just wanted to draw attention to this kind of disparity. Representative Goodman brought up some racial disparities, and wanted to know if, it's part of the conversation in Olympia, what that looks like, if there are, legislative barriers that you're seeing, or really any general thoughts on this kind of thing.
I have lots of thoughts on this kind of things. I will say to you that before I was in the Senate, Senator Darneal was chair of this committee. One of the pieces of legislation that she created was gender responsive care for the Department of Corrections. And there's a law apparently that says after you write a piece of legislation, you can't actually take part in doing anything around that legislation for a period of time. So Senator Darneal 2 years ago stepped away from her role in the Senate and took on a job inside corrections to create that gender responsive care unit. So has been working diligently
inside corrections, along with folks who are navigators and in support of individuals who identify LGBTQIA+ within our systems of incarceration. It's a very interesting thing, because when you think about who identifies as trans, also thinking about where they are placed and how they're placed. There's also some very vocal groups who are trans radical feminists who believe very strongly that there is no such thing as a trans individual, and those that are in the prison system oftentimes are taking medication they're taking until we get into a facility where they can then harm women again. So we have institutional barriers, we have barriers related to philosophies and beliefs. There's a lot of shit that goes down in that path. And you add the intersectionality, oftentimes communities of color, then you talk about everything else that goes into that, and you keep adding these layers on. And again, this is an area that people are very uncomfortable with. And it's an interesting thing if you're a transgender male who's transgendering to be female, is very different situation than if you are a female transgendering and transgendering to a male. And you were the way you're treated or the way you're handled or the options that you're given are limited and very different. And it's an area when we think of institution, we have to think of safety for all. And what I know is we were finding people being held in medical. We were finding people being held in isolation and in solitary, not because of anything they've done, but because of who they were, how they identified, and the institution's lack of knowledge of how to deal with them or what to do with them. So we have a lot of work to do on the inside, but we also have to figure out what a safe space looks like, how we create that safe space, and then how we acknowledge and affirm, and then allow people to be their true authentic selves when they are incarcerated. It's like a freaking onion, just gonna say, it's really difficult. And it's not like staying in a single hotel room or a single dorm, right? If you're in isolation or solitary because of who you are, that's not appropriate. That's not how somebody needs to live or wants to live. We've got to figure out another way to do it. So I don't have any big answers. I'm just trying to work through the system and the institution to figure out, because it is our reality. There are people, we have older people that are working, right? And they believe people are either born female or you're born feminine. And I can explain to people that are my own age that says, we all experimented, remember, you did too. But what you did was go back to a corner. And what young people and what people realize now is that we're fluid and our sexuality is on a fluid continuum. So no longer look at things the way we have before. And that's not just in the prison system, that's everywhere. How do people identify whether they're non-binary, whether they're trans, identify as lesbian, somebody else identifies as queer? What does that mean? And then how do we address those things in systems that have traditionally said you are either this or you are them? Ooh, big changes.
I identify as a gay man. I've been since 1981. Actually, I've been since 1958. But regardless, because of that, I attract a lot of clients who are trans in various places of the country. I was a gay activist in the 90s, worked on a lot of Hands Off Washington, Equality Washington, and I've worked with the trans community now for 30 years. I've known members of that community, worked with them, and so forth. That level of comfort, as I say, brings those clients to me. And so what I'll tell you is that in the system, there are pockets of real enlightenment. Seattle police detectives absolutely understand how to deal with trans people and are appropriate the way they do that, at least the ones I work with. The sex offender treatment evaluators include some of the stupidest and most bigoted people I've ever met, but also includes some really enlightened people who do really good work with working with my trans clients. I had a case on last Friday in a charge which normally would have got my client 3 to 6 months in jail. But because of my client's experiences during the booking on the investigation stage, And because of how bad the county jail policy was for transgender individuals, the state agreed not to recommend any jail time at all, and the court agreed with us. So we spared my client that experience. So what I'm seeing, it's like the rest of society, is, you know, the back and forth, the up and down, but there's a growing awareness that it's not just about getting the pronoun right each time. That it's really about respect, and it's about how you honor someone's identity and how you work with them and help them through the system without trying to force them to become someone. So I do see a lot of hope. I get a lot of good results from my clients. I'm not seeing in Western Washington the problems I suspect I would in Eastern Washington or in Central Missouri or all those other places in this country that are so scary to people. You know, I'm lucky. I grew up here in Tukwila. And if you grew up in Tukwila in the 50s and 60s, like I did, you learn to pass. So I'm butch enough that I can pass all the time, right? Nobody, oh, you're gay, not that whole thing. And so that, you know, cisgender, you know, butch enough to pass identity, I've kind of hidden behind much of my life. And I try not to. So I'm not shy about talking about my husband or whatever's going on in my life, but I just say that because I want to acknowledge what Senator Wilson just said, which is I can walk into the room and, you know, you all wonder, you know, where my wife and I went for our honeymoon. You know, that the question I get is, you know, it's that bias. So anyway, I just want you to know there's hope. Thank you all so much.
Right. Well, this is about the end of the symposium. I just wanted to thank everyone for coming out, standing behind Reentry and Second Chances for our county and our state. Goal is to make the symposium a statewide event with spotlighting other organizations so that we all can succeed for the people we serve. We must bridge all the gaps so that no one falls through the cracks and fails to have what they need to succeed. If you want to assist or partner us with this next symposium that we're going to have, let me know, or let Jeremy know, Tom, Ed. You can also donate by using the card you info which you've heard today, and that'll help bring us and bring you bigger and better symposiums in the future. So right now we're gonna go ahead and end, and it's gonna be a network social time until everybody kind of clears out. I hope you enjoyed the event. See you next time. Thank you.